Teachers, childcare workers of Reddit. What is worst case of helicopter parenting? My child can do no wrong you've ever seen. I work in a kindy in China. We have about 35 kids in each class, seated in 4 rows of 8, with a split down the middle, facing the teacher. We move the children about once a month. Each child moves back 1 row, and the back row gets to sit in the front row. One parent came in and told us that her child must always be seated in the front row. There's nothing wrong with the child's eyesight, she's just too special to be seated anywhere but the front row, I guess. The parent did not request this, she ordered us. Another time in primary, the headmaster came to talk to me, aghast. We had one special group of children that was taught all in English for every subject. This is very expensive and all the parents are pretty rich. One guy has 3 Porsches, a red, yellow and blue one, and drives whatever color he feels like to school. He also has several Harley Davidsons. Anyway, this very rich mother was upset because the other rich kids didn't want to play with her daughter. Her daughter, having servants at home, tried to order the other kids around, and you can imagine how popular that made her. This mother threatened to have the other children killed unless they started playing with her daughter. Music teacher here. I had a helly mom of one of my guitar students sit in on him during his first lesson. She was sitting right by him, shoulder to shoulder. As I was talking about various things like how to hold the guitar and how to shape your hands and fingers around the neck, she would grab his hand and do it for him. Every single time. For everything. Time to strum some chords. Mom did that for him too. Can't get the fret hand to squeeze hard enough to make the strings ring. She pressed his fingers for him. He cried out at that, and that's when I stopped and told her she had to let him do it on his own. All I got for that was a sharp look and a fine then. He tried on his own and the string just made kind of a thud noise, and she said, "See, he needs me to help him." I told her that the only way he was going to be able to do it was to try and do it on his own. He was the one who had to build up the strength. Things didn't really progress much after that, and I ended the lesson. With all of that, I wasn't thinking they'd be sticking around for a second week, but back they came. Second lesson started off the same, and I politely told her she'd have to give him space in order to try. Still, she wasn't thrilled but relented and got up in a huff and went out into the hall to watch from there. After she left, this kid took a deep breath and was visibly more relaxed. After she stepped out, he was able to have his own space and he actually try on his own. He started to do better. It was awesome. At the end of the lesson, he said he couldn't wait to come back, and his mom came in and grilled him with something like, "Why can't you do that when I'm helping you? You don't want my help. You don't need my help." I could understand stuff like this if he was a young kid, 7 or younger, but dude's 14 years old. He's going to be a freshman in the fall. This poor kid has ended up being one of my best students. His mom still hovers and he's still a super weird and socially awkward dude from living in a bubble, but he's finally found something he can be good at independently from his mom. It's really rewarding to see him gaining more and more confidence, even if it is slowly. He'll get there someday. An incredibly quiet student just flat out refused to engage in any discussion in class. She was an extremely pleasant girl. She just wouldn't speak. I brought it up with her mother during an interview, and she told me she'd forbidden her daughter to express her opinion and to just listen to the teacher out of fear they wouldn't agree with her opinion and mark her down out of bias. I assured her that expressing an opinion wouldn't get a student marked down in my class and that developing one is important to her learning, but she just said I'd rather she didn't. While studying, I work in an after-school care. One day a 9-year-old was showing everyone his lighter by trying to set the shirt he was wearing on fire. I obviously took the lighter off him. When his mother came to pick him up, I handed it to her and told her about him trying to set his shirt on fire. Turns out it was a lighter, so I had no right to confiscate it, and her son just wouldn't try to set his clothes in fire because he's not an idiot. So I must be making that up. I bet if you said he was trying to destroy the lighter, she would have changed her tune. Criminal defense lawyer here. I was talking to my 23-year-old client in the hallway before court. His mom walked up to me and said forcefully, "He is a child. Do you understand me? A child," because she was upset that he was in trouble with the law. While I was student teaching, I had a student and his mom was the art teacher. The student was a straight up douche, would cheat on any assignment, belittle classmates, etc. Anytime the student got in trouble or called out, he would run to his mom, the art teacher, and she would fight for him. All the teachers in the schools were afraid of her since she has been in the district for a long time and was thought to do no wrong by the administration. The student ended up plagiarizing an essay in class. I gave the student a 0, as it was stated in the assignment sheet that all plagiarism would be an automatic 0, and all heck broke loose. Meetings with the principal were set up. Mom would come in during my plan period and rip my butt for failing her kid, and the student would come fake crying to class the work. The essay was a large portion of the grade and would mean he would fail the class. After about 2 weeks of the mom coming in, I finally told her if he turned a new essay into me by the end of week he could get 50% credit on it, would move his grade to a D if he got a 100%. The student comes waltzing into class on Friday and hands me his essay. After quickly scanning the essay, it just seemed off. After a quick Google search, the student took the entire Wikipedia page and copied it for his essay. After school, I went down to the art room to talk to the mom. I still remember the conversation like it was yesterday. Me. M did a great job on his essay. Mom. Great. He was locked up in his room all week working on it. Me. When I looked at his paper, I did notice there was an odd section though. Mom. What do you mean? Me. This section has a superscript number on it and I don't see where he cited it. Mom. That is odd. I'll ask him about it. Me. Pulls out the printed Wikipedia page over his topic that is word for word. Here is the Wikipedia page over his topic if you want to look at. Mom. Scanning over both and her face turns ghost white. Will he be able to make this up? Me. With a look of disbelief on my face. Heck no. The student ended up getting suspended and mom tried to fight the suspension. She even went as far to look into the legitimacy of the grade since a student teacher taught the course. All in all, the mom is no longer a teacher in the district and the kid is in jail for selling drugs. The rest of the staff loved me for standing up to her and her so. I taught middle school for 1 year. We had a student who was being disruptive in all the classes. He was refusing to turn in work, or even do it. He was constantly causing trouble. We had each tried several strategies to deal with the behavior in our own time. We had each talked to the parents numerous times, but they never did anything nor believed that the student was doing anything inappropriate. No one was having any success. Eventually one of the teachers had enough, so he suggested we do a meeting between all of the students' teachers, the guidance counselor, a vice principal, the student, and his parents. There are 6 teachers plus the vice principal and the guidance counselor all saying the same basic version of student needs to pay attention, needs to do the work, needs to stop distracting other students, needs to be respectful, etc. etc. The mother disbelieves us. It's not the student's fault. We all have it in for the student. Nothing changed. Teaching sucks. Okay, 2 great stories. 1. Happened in 2006. A parent who volunteered in her child's classroom just to videotape her child all day, every day. She threatened to sue if we did not allow her to. She did this all through elementary. It ended in middle school when they told her no. She stood outside the fence and videotaped him at pay. Someone saw this and called the police. She pulled her kid and homeschooled him. 2. Happened to a brother and sister I went to high school with. The son was socially awkward, tall and a little round. He was in high school for only a year by himself, but his mom was present at every band function we had. She even tried to come to every practice, even the ones from 9 AM to 9 PM. But then she decided that her 7th grade daughter was going to skip the 8th grade so she could enter high school early. Now she had 2 kids, she was always at school, even stopping by to lunch with them. It was so sad. The kids were miserable. Then she had her daughter skip the 11th grade, literally appealing to the school board, threatening legal action if they held back her child from her destiny. So now she has both kids in the same grade. They graduate together. Mom enrolls them in community college together, in the same classes, with her. So she is now going to classes with them. She never actually passes the classes, but she wants to be with them so that the professors know she is watching. Since she is a student, there are no grounds for having her removed. The kids get ready to transfer to the local university. They are done with mom. She tries to sit in on classes, but that is a big no from day one. They diverge in interests, so they get their own majors. Then they go nuts with classes, appealing to admin to take a huge load of credits. They are in school all day every day they can. How I met up with them again was weird. I was working on campus and closed the library one night. I found them bedding down for the night in their old station wagon in the parking lot. I offered to let them stay overnight with me. They came to my house and told the tale. Last I heard, the daughter dropped out and went into the medical field. I had a boy who kept acting out in class. Things like talking to classmates while I was giving directions, giving strange answers, hitting the boys sitting next to him in the arm, grabbing a boy's dong during class. I kept notes and informed our academy director about what was happening, and he was pulled aside after school a few times to talk about his behavior. One day, at the end of class, he reached across the table and forcefully flicked a girl in the forehead. She complained and he cocked back his arm like he was going to punch her in response. I had him sit while I let everyone else leave and told him to stay seated while I discussed his behavior with the academy director. If nothing else, being the last one to go would be a sort of punishment. The director chewed him out, and apparently he told his mom about it because his mom came to the academy to say that her son was an angel and I should be reprimanded for exaggerating or lying about the situation. Cue the director listing off all the crap her son had done over the past few weeks and telling her that her son was no longer welcome at the academy. Never saw him again after that. Less helicopter parent, more my child is innocent and a scam. My mom was kicked out of work, temporarily, from her underprivileged school until this case was settled. A kindergartner had just gotten her ears pierced and she took the earrings out in class because they hurt. The teacher sent her to the health secretary, my mom, and the little girl lost an earring somewhere along the way, cleaned the ears and sent her back to class. Mother of the child sued my mom and filed a case with the school because I guess the earrings were solid gold and diamond. I guess that's what Claire's pierced with. Seems legit. Tried to accuse my mom of stealing the earring. No chance that a 6-year-old lost a tiny object. Of course the woman did not win in this situation and my mom got back to work, but it was a whole bunch of baloney, accusing the teachers and office employees at the school for a lost earring and injured earlobe. This is a little different from the rest of these, but it sprung to mind. I taught a 5-year-old whose very eccentric and wealthy mother came in to meet with us before he started to tell us that he had some developmental and social issues and needed a little extra attention and help understanding things. Note that at this age a lot of kids aren't officially tested yet for anything. He comes in and we discover after a week or two that he is absolutely 100% freaking fine developmentally. He's just horribly behaved and has never been disciplined in his entire life. He was a nightmare who was rude, entitled, and bratty, but he was perfectly smart, and once we got through to him about what behavior was expected of him, he could easily do it. She was a lazy parent who, instead of admitting that he was a brat, chalked it up to disabilities. To sum it up, there's no way that my child can be wrong. Something must be wrong with him. Another one. Same school, a 6-year-old student's father taught him the phrase "my daddy is going to get you fired" and told him to say it whenever a teacher mistreated him, which obviously meant whenever we tried to even remotely discipline him or ask him to do anything such as clean up after himself. My mom owned a daycare center, and I worked there when I wasn't in school. There were some very unique kids and some crazy ass parents. The one that comes mind though had a 6-year-old son. This kid was an incredible brat, but as soon as you met his parents you understood why. He had just started school and was coming home upset because kids were making fun of him because of his pacifier that he kept with him and used throughout the day. So his mom decided to wait with him at the school bus stop and pick him up from there. One day they were waiting and he mentioned he had a wedgie. So right there at the bus stop, in front of all the kids in his class and the crossing guard, his mom picked it for him. Just stuck her hand down his pants and took care of it for him. She wouldn't even let him handle his own wedgie. Needless to say, that did not help with his teasing. Work at a summer camp and we told scary stories. One of the boys in the camp couldn't sleep for the whole week because of some of the stories, so his mom demanded the scary stories be banned, otherwise she would basically badmouth our programs. The next Monday the boy complained to me that we couldn't tell scary stories anymore and was upset about it. Tell that to your freaking mom. I had a student who was failing pretty badly. He had a pretty bad attitude and was extremely disrespectful. When I called his father, the response was "You're a woman." He doesn't need to respect you. I handed the phone to a male mentor teacher pretty dumbfounded and explained the situation. The male teacher proceeded to ream the dad out and then had the kid transferred from my class to his class. The kid still failed and was still a disrespectful butt. Not sure what the dad had to say about that, but at least he couldn't blame it on me being a woman. I had a 3rd grade student whose mother felt that I favored other students over her son. She would call me and yell at me about not treating him fairly and lying. She snuck past the office a few times to come into the classroom to watch me teach, which of course is illegal and I'd have to call the office. She'd tell me and the principal that she was trying to catch me in the act of being dishonest. Of course my principal always defended me and dealt with the parent. As a final straw, the mother bought a watch with a voice recorder in it and the boy wore it to school. He yelled out in the middle of class suddenly, "I'm secretly recording you and you won't teach here for much longer." An 8 years old, of course the watch was confiscated and the child was moved into a different classroom, though the school district could have legally moved him into another. But the mother still never backed down and the next teacher had similar issues. "I'm secretly recording you." Well Timmy, it's not much of frickin' secret anymore. Before uni started we used to hold activities for first year students. Fresh week for Canadians reading this. Nothing educational, but always good fun. Had a student show up with his mother, and she questioned everything we were doing and how it will relate to her son's studies. It didn't. We were very clear that it was all for building relationships and a bit of pre-study enjoyment. It was also a chance to meet older students and get an idea of uni life. She was having none of it. She wanted to speak with the head of department and file an official complaint about these activities. Clearly having fun was not part of an education. The second day she came again and triumphantly said the dean is coming to talk to us. The dean did come, gave us a pep talk and said how much he enjoyed this time of the year, chugged a beer and told us to join him in the local pub later on. She was speechless and left in a huff, dragging her son by the hand. Neither showed up for the rest of the week. I wasn't a teacher, but I did have a brief stint as a cheerleading coach. Kid gives an attitude about doing literally anything, won't follow any instruction and usually either sasses me or sits on her phone. Additionally, kid skips practice to snort Xanax and put it on her Snapchat. Okay, I told her that if she wasn't interested in participating, she can sit in the stands Friday night instead. Kid proceeds to go to bathroom and calls mother. It's not like I can actually take away their phones. Try dealing with parents on that. Mother drives from work 30 minutes to scream at me for almost an hour. Apparently it is my fault. Her child is the best on the team and I am clearly targeting her. She says I have destroyed her confidence and am jealous of her talent. She can do whatever she wants if she's the best on the squad. Ooh, okay lady. I stopped coaching after that year. Teachers, childcare workers of Reddit. What is worst case of helicopter parenting my child can do no wrong you've ever seen? I work in a kindy in China. We have about 35 kids in each class, seated in 4 rows of 8, with a split down the middle, facing the teacher. We move the children about once a month. Each child moves back 1 row, and the back row gets to sit in the front row. One parent came in and told us that her child must always be seated in the front row. There's nothing wrong with the child's eyesight. She's just too special to be seated anywhere but the front row, I guess. The parent did not request this. She ordered us. Another time in primary the headmaster came to talk to me, aghast. We had one special group of children that was taught all in English for every subject. This is very expensive and all the parents are pretty rich. One guy has 3 Porsches, a red, yellow and blue one, and drives whatever color he feels like to school. He also has several Harley Davidsons. Anyway, this very rich mother was upset because the other rich kids didn't want to play with her daughter. Her daughter, having servants at home, tried to order the other kids around, and you can imagine how popular that made her. This mother threatened to have the other children killed unless they started playing with her daughter. Music teacher here. I had a helly mom of one of my guitar students sit in on him during his first lesson. She was sitting right by him, shoulder to shoulder. As I was talking about various things like how to hold the guitar and how to shape your hands and fingers around the neck, she would grab his hand and do it for him. Every single time. For everything. Time to strum some chords. Mom did that for him too. Can't get the fret hand to squeeze hard enough to make the strings ring. She pressed his fingers for him. He cried out at that, and that's when I stopped and told her she had to let him do it on his own. All I got for that was a sharp look and a fine then. He tried on his own and the string just made kind of a thud noise, and she said, "See, he needs me to help him." I told her that the only way he was going to be able to do it was to try and do it on his own. He was the one who had to build up the strength. Things didn't really progress much after that, and I ended the lesson. With all of that, I wasn't thinking they'd be sticking around for a second week, but back they came. Second lesson started off the same, and I politely told her she'd have to give him space in order to try. Still, she wasn't thrilled but relented and got up in a huff and went out into the hall to watch from there. After she left, this kid took a deep breath and was visibly more relaxed. After she stepped out, he was able to have his own space and he actually try on his own. He started to do better. It was awesome. At the end of the lesson, he said he couldn't wait to come back, and his mom came in and grilled him with something like, "Why can't you do that when I'm helping you? You don't want my help? You don't need my help?" I could understand stuff like this if he was a young kid, 7 or younger, but dude's 14 years old. He's going to be a freshman in the fall. This poor kid has ended up being one of my best students. His mom still hovers and he's still a super weird and socially awkward dude from living in a bubble, but he's finally found something he can be good at independently from his mom. It's really rewarding to see him gaining more and more confidence, even if it is slowly. He'll get there someday. An incredibly quiet student just flat out refused to engage in any discussion in class. She was an extremely pleasant girl. She just wouldn't speak. I brought it up with her mother during an interview, and she told me she'd forbidden her daughter to express her opinion and to just listen to the teacher out of fear they wouldn't agree with her opinion and mark her down out of bias. I assured her that expressing an opinion wouldn't get a student marked down in my class and that developing one is important to her learning, but she just said I'd rather she didn't. While studying, I work in an after-school care. One day a 9-year-old was showing everyone his lighter by trying to set the shirt he was wearing on fire. I obviously took the lighter off him. When his mother came to pick him up, I handed it to her and told her about him trying to set his shirt on fire. Turns out it was a lighter, so I had no right to confiscate it, and her son just wouldn't try to set his clothes in fire because he's not an idiot. So I must be making that up. I bet if you said he was trying to destroy the lighter, she would have changed her tune. Criminal defense lawyer here. I was talking to my 23-year-old client in the hallway before court. His mom walked up to me and said forcefully, "He is a child. Do you understand me? A child," because she was upset that he was in trouble with the law. While I was student teaching, I had a student and his mom was the art teacher. The student was a straight up douche, would cheat on any assignment, belittle classmates, etc. Anytime the student got in trouble or called out, he would run to his mom, the art teacher, and she would fight for him. All the teachers in the schools were afraid of her since she has been in the district for a long time and was thought to do no wrong by the administration. The student ended up plagiarizing an essay in class. I gave the student a 0, as it was stated in the assignment sheet that all plagiarism would be an automatic 0, and all heck broke loose. Meetings with the principal were set up. Mom would come in during my plan period and rip my butt for failing her kid, and the student would come fake crying to class the work. The essay was a large portion of the grade and would mean he would fail the class. After about 2 weeks of the mom coming in, I finally told her if he turned a new essay into me by the end of week, he could get 50% credit on it, would move his grade to a D if he got a 100%. The student comes waltzing into class on Friday and hands me his essay. After quickly scanning the essay, it just seemed off. After a quick Google search, the student took the entire Wikipedia page and copied it for his essay. After school, I went down to the art room to talk to the mom. I still remember the conversation like it was yesterday. Me. M did a great job on his essay. Mom. Great. He was locked up in his room all week working on it. Me. When I looked at his paper, I did notice there was an odd section though. Mom. What do you mean? Me. This section has a superscript number on it and I don't see where he cited it. Mom. That is odd. I'll ask him about it. Me. Pulls out the printed Wikipedia page over his topic that is word for word. Here is the Wikipedia page over his topic if you want to look at. Mom. Scanning over both and her face turns ghost white. Will he be able to make this up? Me. With a look of disbelief on my face. Heck no. The student ended up getting suspended and mom tried to fight the suspension. She even went as far to look into the legitimacy of the grade since a student teacher taught the course. All in all, the mom is no longer a teacher in the district and the kid is in jail for selling drugs. The rest of the staff loved me for standing up to her and her so. I taught middle school for 1 year. We had a student who was being disruptive in all the classes. He was refusing to turn in work, or even do it. He was constantly causing trouble. We had each tried several strategies to deal with the behavior in our own time. We had each talked to the parents numerous times, but they never did anything nor believed that the student was doing anything inappropriate. No one was having any success. Eventually one of the teachers had enough, so he suggested we do a meeting between all of the students' teachers, the guidance counselor, a vice principal, the student, and his parents. There are 6 teachers plus the vice principal and the guidance counselor all saying the same basic version of student needs to pay attention, needs to do the work, needs to stop distracting other students, needs to be respectful, etc. etc. The mother disbelieves us. It's not the student's fault. We all have it in for the student. Nothing changed. Teaching sucks. Okay, 2 great stories. 1. Happened in 2006. A parent who volunteered in her child's classroom just to videotape her child all day, every day. She threatened to sue if we did not allow her to. She did this all through elementary. It ended in middle school when they told her no. She stood outside the fence and videotaped him at pay. Someone saw this and called the police. She pulled her kid and homeschooled him. 2. Happened to a brother and sister I went to high school with. The son was socially awkward, tall and a little round. He was in high school for only a year by himself, but his mom was present at every band function we had. She even tried to come to every practice, even the ones from 9 AM to 9 PM. But then she decided that her 7th grade daughter was going to skip the 8th grade so she could enter high school early. Now she had 2 kids, she was always at school, even stopping by to lunch with them. It was so sad. The kids were miserable. Then she had her daughter skip the 11th grade, literally appealing to the school board, threatening legal action if they held back her child from her destiny. So now she has both kids in the same grade. They graduate together. Mom enrolls them in community college together, in the same classes, with her. So she is now going to classes with them. She never actually passes the classes, but she wants to be with them so that the professors know she is watching. Since she is a student, there are no grounds for having her removed. The kids get ready to transfer to the local university. They are done with mom. She tries to sit in on classes, but that is a big no from day one. They diverge in interests, so they get their own majors. Then they go nuts with classes, appealing to admin to take a huge load of credits. They are in school all day every day they can. How I met up with them again was weird. I was working on campus and closed the library one night. I found them bedding down for the night in their old station wagon in the parking lot. I offered to let them stay overnight with me. They came to my house and told the tale. Last I heard, the daughter dropped out and went into the medical field. I had a boy who kept acting out in class. Things like talking to classmates while I was giving directions, giving strange answers, hitting the boys sitting next to him in the arm, grabbing a boy's dong during class. I kept notes and informed our academy director about what was happening, and he was pulled aside after school a few times to talk about his behavior. One day, at the end of class, he reached across the table and forcefully flicked a girl in the forehead. She complained and he cocked back his arm like he was going to punch her in response. I had him sit while I let everyone else leave and told him to stay seated while I discussed his behavior with the academy director. If nothing else, being the last one to go would be a sort of punishment. The director chewed him out, and apparently he told his mom about it because his mom came to the academy to say that her son was an angel and I should be reprimanded for exaggerating or lying about the situation. Cue the director listing off all the crap her son had done over the past few weeks and telling her that her son was no longer welcome at the academy. Never saw him again after that. Less helicopter parent. More my child is innocent and a scam. My mom was kicked out of work, temporarily, from her underprivileged school until this case was settled. A kindergartner had just gotten her ears pierced and she took the earrings out in class because they hurt. The teacher sent her to the health secretary, my mom, and the little girl lost an earring somewhere along the way, cleaned the ears and sent her back to class. Mother of the child sued my mom and filed a case with the school because I guess the earrings were solid gold and diamond. I guess that's what Claire's pierced with. Seems legit. Tried to accuse my mom of stealing the earring. No chance that a 6-year-old lost a tiny object. Of course the woman did not win in this situation and my mom got back to work, but it was a whole bunch of baloney, accusing the teachers and office employees at the school for a lost earring and injured earlobe. This is a little different from the rest of these, but it sprung to mind. I taught a 5-year-old whose very eccentric and wealthy mother came in to meet with us before he started to tell us that he had some developmental and social issues and needed a little extra attention and help understanding things. Note that at this age a lot of kids aren't officially tested yet for anything. He comes in and we discover after a week or two that he is absolutely 100% freaking fine developmentally. He's just horribly behaved and has never been disciplined in his entire life. He was a nightmare who was rude, entitled, and bratty, but he was perfectly smart, and once we got through to him about what behavior was expected of him, he could easily do it. She was a lazy parent who, instead of admitting that he was a brat, chalked it up to disabilities. To sum it up, there's no way that my child can be wrong, something must be wrong with him. Another one. Same school, a 6-year-old student's father taught him the phrase "my daddy is going to get you fired" and told him to say it whenever a teacher mistreated him, which obviously meant whenever we tried to even remotely discipline him or ask him to do anything such as clean up after himself. My mom owned a daycare center, and I worked there when I wasn't in school. There were some very unique kids and some crazy ass parents. The one that comes mind though had a 6-year-old son. This kid was an incredible brat, but as soon as you met his parents you understood why. He had just started school and was coming home upset because kids were making fun of him because of his pacifier that he kept with him and used throughout the day. So his mom decided to wait with him at the school bus stop and pick him up from there. One day they were waiting and he mentioned he had a wedgie. So right there at the bus stop, in front of all the kids in his class and the crossing guard, his mom picked it for him. Just stuck her hand down his pants and took care of it for him. She wouldn't even let him handle his own wedgie. Needless to say, that did not help with his teasing. Work at a summer camp and we told scary stories. One of the boys in the camp couldn't sleep for the whole week because of some of the stories, so his mom demanded the scary stories be banned, otherwise she would basically badmouth our programs. The next Monday the boy complained to me that we couldn't tell scary stories anymore and was upset about it. Tell that to your freaking mom. I had a student who was failing pretty badly. He had a pretty bad attitude and was extremely disrespectful. When I called his father, the response was, "You're a woman. He doesn't need to respect you." I handed the phone to a male mentor teacher pretty dumbfounded and explained the situation. The male teacher proceeded to ream the dad out and then had the kid transferred from my class to his class. The kid still failed and was still a disrespectful butt. Not sure what the dad had to say about that, but at least he couldn't blame it on me being a woman. I had a 3rd grade student whose mother felt that I favored other students over her son. She would call me and yell at me about not treating him fairly and lying. She snuck past the office a few times to come into the classroom to watch me teach, which of course is illegal and I'd have to call the office. She'd tell me and the principal that she was trying to catch me in the act of being dishonest. Of course my principal always defended me and dealt with the parent. As a final straw, the mother bought a watch with a voice recorder in it and the boy wore it to school. He yelled out in the middle of class suddenly, "I'm secretly recording you and you won't teach here for much longer." An 8 years old, of course the watch was confiscated and the child was moved into a different classroom, though the school district could have legally moved him into another. But the mother still never backed down and the next teacher had similar issues. "I'm secretly recording you." Well Timmy, it's not much of frickin' secret anymore. Before uni started we used to hold activities for 1st year students. Fresh week for Canadians reading this. Nothing educational, but always good fun. Had a student show up with his mother, and she questioned everything we were doing and how it will relate to her son's studies. It didn't. We were very clear that it was all for building relationships and a bit of pre-study enjoyment. It was also a chance to meet older students and get an idea of uni life. She was having none of it. She wanted to speak with the head of department and file an official complaint about these activities. Clearly having fun was not part of an education. The second day she came again and triumphantly said the dean is coming to talk to us. The dean did come, gave us a pep talk and said how much he enjoyed this time of the year, chugged a beer and told us to join him in the local pub later on. She was speechless and left in a huff, dragging her son by the hand. Neither showed up for the rest of the week. I wasn't a teacher, but I did have a brief stint as a cheerleading coach. Kid gives an attitude about doing literally anything, won't follow any instruction, and usually either sasses me or sits on her phone. Additionally, kid skips practice to snort Xanax and put it on her Snapchat. Okay, I told her that if she wasn't interested in participating, she can sit in the stands Friday night instead. Kid proceeds to go to bathroom and calls mother. It's not like I can actually take away their phones. Try dealing with parents on that. Mother drives from work 30 minutes to scream at me for almost an hour. Apparently it is my fault. Her child is the best on the team and I am clearly targeting her. She says I have destroyed her confidence and am jealous of her talent. She can do whatever she wants if she's the best on the squad. Ooh, okay lady. I stopped coaching after that year. Teachers of Reddit. What was the trashiest thing you've seen a parent do? Mum used to be a teacher and this happened to someone she worked with. Child was strangling another child. Teacher wasn't strong enough to pull the child off of the other child, so ended up having to thump the child until he released. Child ended up rather bruised. Parents of the child doing the strangling decided they wanted to try and sue the teacher for hitting their child. Result equals teacher who prevented their son from murdering someone suspended from work until the case gets rejected from court. Work at a school where over 80% of our population lives under the poverty line. I keep a cabinet full of hygiene products for kids to take. Deodorant, lotion, chapstick, hair gel, feminine hygiene products, shampoo, conditioner, those kinds of things in travel sizes. Being a teen is hard enough without having to cope with hygiene problems due to lack of funds at home. So one day the entire thing is empty. Odd. I refill the cabinet and 2 days later all of it is gone again. Refill with the last of my supplies. Catch the kid in the act of sweeping everything in his bag. I stop him, take him in the other room and talk to him. He told his mother about the cabinet. She ordered him to bring her everything he could get. She was returning the items to Walmart for store credits to buy cigarettes and beer. I told him to tell her the cabinet is locked now. I bought a bike lock so it was not a lie. It is sickening. Especially sad because it used to be anonymous, but now a student would need to approach and ask to unlock it for something they need and might be too embarrassed. Mother came to her school sports day swigging from a bottle of wine. We always felt desperately sorry for her daughter, because whenever she returned to school following a holiday at home, this was a boarding school, we had to wash all her clothes because they reeked of cigarettes, and this poor little girl was easily the most unhappy child I've ever seen. Sounds like boarding school was the right path for her. Wreck their car buying drugs on the way to pick their child up from preschool, and then try to get another parent to cover for them with their estranged husband. Only after preschool. Woman I used to babysit for worked in a school as an assistant or some crap in Toronto. She always told this story about how the class rabbit would go home with a new kid each weekend. They kept trying to avoid giving one kid the bunny for the weekend because it was clear his home life wasn't the best, but they finally caved and let him take the rabbit home. The parents killed the rabbit and ate it. They killed the class bunny and fried it up for dinner. They weren't even ashamed when they told the teacher what happened on Monday. Said they were out of groceries or something. I firmly believe that class pet should never go home with any student for any reason. My mom's a teacher, and in order to talk to her parent about a child that was struggling due to the school environment, she arranged to meet at the parent's house. Keep in mind this was scheduled in advance with a set time. The dad answered the door 100% naked and tried to have the meeting with him naked on the front porch. My mom doesn't do anything outside the school anymore. Well, in my profession it's more often what the parents don't do that wins them the Parent of the Year award. But I do have a couple Hall of Famers. I'm a special education teacher, so I deal with kids with all kinds of physical, emotional and academic disabilities. I took care of a little girl once who had a number of complications due to spina bifida. Her mother couldn't be bothered to take care of her. The little girl wore diapers and was cathed. She required 3 diaper changes a day. Mum would only send 5 diapers a week. The thing is, she was getting full services from her community, so she was being provided with plenty of supplies. We suspect mom was probably selling the extras. I ended up just buying her diapers. Mum would not change her catheter regularly. We would change her out at school, but other than that she'd go another 24 hours before a change out. Longer, if it was a weekend. The smell from the infection she'd get after a weekend was horrendous. She had lice constantly, and oozing bed bug sores. Mom told us to F off when we'd call and tell her to take her to a doctor. Found out later in the year that she also had scabies. We offered to administer the medications and creams at school. Mom told us to go to heck. Girl would come to school in men's underwear, XXL shirts and size 16 pants. She was 8. Finally discovered that her 9-year-old sister was changing her diapers and dressing her every day, and sister couldn't find any other cleanish clothes to put on her. Mom's response: I'm busy. I have to get to work in the mornings. Final straw was when the nurse discovered what appeared to be STD warts while changing her diaper one day. Nursemaid, for the 10th time. Another CPS report, but principal insisted that we call home and report our findings. Grandma found out, tipped off mom, and mom appeared at the school 15 minutes later, snatched up the kids and disappeared. Investigators showed up 15 minutes later, but mom was already long gone. Never saw the kids again. Your principal is a complete fuckwit. Staff raised money to get an 8-year-old girl a winter coat. Live in rural Canada. Girl came to school the next day in a t-shirt in the dead of winter. Her mom wearing the brand new, child-sized jacket. The cafeteria, which is used for parent meetings, has tables with fixed bench seating. You have to swing a leg over to sit down. Parent wore a short skirt and was commando. She also got up several times. It's funny that you wrote parent, not mom. Now I have to imagine a dad in a short skirt. Our vice principal is a former army sergeant who's built like a tank. He's well liked and an amazing role model in a community where many of our kids don't have a good male role models. On several occasions I've seen mothers step well over the line and make very sexual comments to him directly in front of their kids. I mean in plain sight of their own children and in ways the kids notice. He's always very respectful and often asks another staff member to join him if he sees one of these parents coming to talk. But it's pretty dang trashy when it comes to some of the innuendo I've overheard. These aren't jokes either. They try to get handsy with him too. Your vice principal sounds like a bro principal Skinner. My cousin is a teacher and she once had a parent come to her parent-teacher conference extremely drunk and right before the meeting tried to pull out a bag of coke and start doing lines. Police were called and so was CPS. The school also had to call 911 once because a parent overdosed in the parking lot while waiting to pick up their kid and the poor kid was too young to understand why their mom was slumped over in their car. Jesus, that's rough. As a teacher, I can't imagine having to explain that to one of my kids. Your cousin is doing good work. My mum's story. A girl and her parents were being interviewed before starting high school. The primary school this girl went to notified the high school that the girl was autistic. When my mum tried to discuss how they can best cater to the girl's needs, the parents interrupted. The parents sent the kid out of the room. Say to my mum she's not autistic anymore, she grew out of it. The girl is clearly autistic and the school was trying to help. My school mandated a psychologist for me because I kept complaining about suicidal thoughts, and when they told my parents, because they had to, oh boy, needless to say I never spoke up about being depressed again. I'm a high school teacher. One time a parent of a child who had been going back and forth with another child on social media came to the school to confront the other girl. The mom ended up bursting into my classroom to try to fight one of my 9th grade girls, sending us into a lockdown until the woman was removed by the police. I taught elementary school. I had a 3rd grader who was well behind all the other children in reading skills. He seemed capable of reading, but just never put forth any effort. So I would pull him aside every chance I got and tutor him. It was paying off. He was progressing nicely. Then his mother showed up one afternoon mad as heck because the boy was learning to read. It took me a while to figure out what she was screaming about. It seems she was receiving disability payments because her boy was retarded and incapable of reading. If the caseworker found out the boy could read, the payments would stop. Luckily she caused such a commotion that the assistant principal got involved and she was threatened with arrest. But the poor little boy was scared whenever I tried to teach him. I despise people who try to directly profit at the expense of their children's future. It's a very evil kind of selfishness. I volunteer at after-school programs to help tutor. I had a student earlier this year. Good kid. Loves math. Loves computers. Wants to be a programmer when he grows up. He's really struggling in 7th grade because he has no computer at home. We have to do his online assignments at the program, but we only meet twice a week. I pulled his mom aside and explained how he could be doing much better in school with some kind of PC and internet access at home. She says she can't afford a computer. I tell her that for $200 I could piece all the parts together myself for a fully functional setup that would be sufficient for at least the next few years. I'd even build it with him so he could learn some extremely valuable information. I'd even front her half, but she'd have to pay me back. She says no way, still way out of her budget. Mind you, while we're having this conversation, she's barely looking up to speak to me, too busy scrolling through the gram on her iPhone 10. I say frick it, I'll do it myself. Scrap together all of the parts I can for free. I only had to buy an HDD. The setup was really out of date, but still worked. Gave it to them. Kid was thrilled. About a month later I notice he's trying to finish all his HW at the program again. I ask his mom if everything's okay with the computer. She says it broke down. I say okay, what happened? I'll pick it up and try to fix it. She says she had to throw it away. I pull the kid aside and ask him. He tells me she sold it to her cousin for $50. I really don't like calling people trashy when they're apparently stuck in a culture of poverty. Maybe she needed that $50 for the light bill or groceries. But at the same time she spends 3x that amount on her cell phone each month. So it really just broke my heart. It was like she's doing everything in her power to ensure the kid has no freaking chance at a decent life. I work in a school in one of the most socially deprived areas of the UK. At Parents' Evening, we give every parent a printout of their child's grades in each subject, alongside their target grades. Last year, we had the parent of an 11-year-old respond to this printout by shouting, "What the frick am I going to do with this? I can't fricking read, can I?" This was in front of other children, parents and her child's teachers. Mom slept with her daughter's adult boyfriend. Kicks daughter out of house. Daughter goes to live with dad. Mom tries to say dad molested daughter. Real piece of work. I called a parent about a behavior issue. I must have been on speakerphone because I heard the kid come home. Parent starts screaming at and wailing on the kid, cussing, calling them all sorts of names. I don't even know if the parent remembered I was on the phone. I hung up the phone and went to my principal. Teachers are mandated reporters. Don't hit your kids in front of a teacher. I honestly wish I had a teacher like you. I was abused my entire life by my parents, and was even slapped by my father when I was younger in front of a teacher and they didn't care. I also remember telling 2 different teachers about me being abused and they didn't listen or care, which all made me believe what I was going through was normal. This one was pretty funny. A parent brought out a pack of sweets or something and her son asked, "Can I have some?" To which the mother responded, "Where's your freaking manners? How about freaking please?" I facepalmed so hard. Nice moment of humor in an otherwise depressing thread. Oh my god, I've worked in behavior units juvies for a few years, so you can imagine the families we get. My fabs took the kids out on the last day of term. Pull into the driveway and one of the kids' mothers is standing there, can of Monster in one hand, cigarette in the other, and wearing a mini skirt and knee-high boots in the middle of winter. One grandparent used to come in wearing a dirty singlet with his belly hanging out, would try to kiss me and called me love, darling, and babe. A kid left grounds without permission so didn't have his phone, etc., which we confiscate. Mum came to pick it up, and when the principal tried to engage her in a conversation about her son's behavior, she attacked him with her handbag. I worked in a similar job. We had one family that encouraged the kid, who we believe had fetal alcohol syndrome, to not listen to us. We believed because if he never graduated the program they wouldn't have to care for him. On a home visit once, the first thing said to him when he came in the house was that he had to sleep on the floor because they got rid of his bed. I have to. There is a parent who would walk through our closed campus every single day. As teachers we are supposed to stop her because it's a closed campus. Every single day she would pretend she didn't know the rules. We always knew it was the same parent because she let her younger children who weren't in school yet ride around on their scooters ahead of her. One day she was walking through with a stroller. She was not paying attention and her freaking baby started falling out of the front of the stroller. I saw 4 teachers jump up to help the kid and the mom didn't even acknowledge. The other one happened directly to me during parent-teacher conferences. I was meeting with a mom and her live-in boyfriend about her son. At the end of the conference I asked if they had any questions I could answer for them and he started asking me personal questions and flirting with me. I deflected and told them I had more conferences. But other teachers have told me that parents have hit on them before, so it's probably pretty common. Not a teacher but a college administrator. Parents will call in very frequently when there is an issue with their student's living situation. If they're in butthole frequent, I quote FERPA to them. Best example, I had to bill a student for around $600 in damages to their room at the end of the year. Mom called me off about this because they had tried to repair the damages poorly. She ended up yelling about this over the phone, and I reminded her that her son was 22 years old and that I could only talk with him about this. Kid calls me back the next day and apologizes for his mom being a B to me and asks if I'm able to just bulls his mom when she calls back. It's a weird line of work. I worked at an IT job on college campus for a few years. Parents would call all the time trying to creep on their kids' grades, passwords, friends. FERPA was always there to save the day. I'm sorry Maram, Congress says I am not allowed to give you your children's grades. Not a teacher but my dad once worked as a groundskeeper at a primary school. Worst thing he ever saw was a guy dropping his daughter off to school and before she went through the gate her dad went through her school bag and took out all of her packed food and left eating it, essentially leaving her with nothing to eat that day. Dad was so angry he said he wanted to knock the guy out right then and therefore leaving his child with no food for the day, but he ended up going straight to the principal to tell them what he witnessed so it could be investigated properly and get the kid help. My kid went to the preschool run by the public school system. One day I saw one of his classmates. Every student was either 3 or 4. Moms opened the front passenger door. Kid climbed in, and they drove off with the radio cranked and the little girl dancing on the seat leaning against the dashboard. The back seat was totally empty, not even a car seat. The next day, I offered the lady my other kid's seat. I'd buy another one on the way home. She told me to frick off and drove away with her daughter again standing on the front seat. I let the principal know, and we watched the car drive off into traffic towards the highway L. Day 3, I've called the police, but they'll only come out of I called during the pickup. Great, that'll only take 30 minutes for them too. After mom drives off with daughter dancing on the seat again, I tell the principal I'm reporting the mom to family services if she won't intervene. On day 4, a guy shows up in her car and comes nose to nose with me, without even so much as an introduction. He says if I keep harassing his woman I'll regret it. I tell the principal, nothing she can do. They stopped bringing the kid to school after that. As a teacher, your principal is a craphead. God damn it, we are mandatory reporters. And even in my small town if we see something we go above whoever and report it. Blamed me for their child's suicide attempt. Their kid wasn't even coming to my class, and the suicide attempt was apparently not bad enough to hospitalize her or get her the help she needed. The parent confronted me with this in the fall. By the spring we had a meeting with us, the kid, and my administration, and the parent came around to the fact that their child was essentially gaslighting them and using me as a scapegoat. But blaming someone who had spent maybe 5 hours with their child in a group setting for a suicide attempt was really low. While it's not okay, I can see how someone could rationalize it. The idea that it is their fault is too much for them to bear, so instead they find someone else. Not a parent, but we had a babysitter who would roll up about 2 feet from the curb in her ancient dented to crap gold van, have a preteen in the back slide the door open, and then scream get in at the tiny 5-year-old she was picking up. The poor girl started crying every time. The shit SA team. My mom is a middle school teacher. Just about every day, some crap parent doesn't come pick up their kids because they literally forgot about them or were passed out drunk on drugs. Then the poor child gets sent to daycare, which is not free. Then the crap parents complain about the charge. My mom has had to bring random kids home before who barely know the way home. It's really sad. I am a teacher. We are not allowed to put kids in our cars and take them home. There are legal reasons at play there, but I often wonder how many parents would take advantage of us and have us driving their kids home all the time. When I taught in Lower West Virginia, a mom showed up to her 5th grade sports event MD out. Wish I could have said this was atypical. I had a kid whose aunt was his legal guardian. I told her that he was acting up in class and not doing work, so she threatened to put him back into foster care if he didn't pull his crap together. We told our kid the gypsies would take him. Parent witness to an event, not a teacher. My kid's very first day of school, she's 4. 1/2. In the gym hall, all the kids and parents are in lines according to class, and one by one the teachers come and take them away. Our group was last to go. As we are waiting, a guy storms and clearly drunk starts shouting at a woman in the line, "Why the frick didn't you tell me it was now? I've been looking everywhere, etc." He slapped the mum. Another dad in the line pulls drunk dad away and pushes him. He falls down on top of another kid. That kid's mum screams. Drunk starts to run out. Squished kid's dad chases him. He made it out of the gym but then got caught and the crap kicked out at him in the school reception. Everyone is freaked out. Kids are crying, then the very happy teacher who is completely unaware comes in. I start googling prices for private schools. Squished kid had me laughing. I'm so sorry. A male parent came in and explained how his son was a mistake. His explanation was that he was just young, dumb and full of CM. When I taught English in China, my good friend and colleague started sleeping with one of the mothers, a woman 15 years his senior and married. I taught her daughter and would often hear stories about how they snuck around behind the husband's back. At least it wasn't the daughter. When I was a sub, I had to sub a 4th grade class for 2 weeks. The kids had to write a story about their family and read them to the class. The smartest girl in the class wrote about the dog her dad gave her, except every time she mentioned the word dad she said my dad. Sorry, I mean the sperm donor. I asked the office about it. Her mom is crazy AF. My girlfriend refers to the father of her child as a sperm donor but never in front of the kid. Not a teacher anymore, but an RN. Kid wakes up from dental surgery. A 4-year-old who needed a root canal, several extractions and fillings. Horrible dentition. Mom dad nowhere to be found post-op. Eventually wander into recovery in from parking lot, reeking of cigarettes and weed. Proceed to give the 4-year-old a baby bottle of Mountain Dew. The pediatric dentist took the parents aside into a consult room and yelled at lectures them. They told him to mind his own freaking business, scooped up the kid and walked out. Saddest part was I remember the poor kiddo had filthy feet and hair. Also reeked of cigarettes. He looked so defeated already. All I could think was that this kid has an uphill battle for a decent life. Being an RN is heartbreaking. Not always for the reasons you'd expect. I work in a middle school with an elementary school next door. 2 girls from my school were arguing all day and told their parents about it when they got out of school. The parents proceeded to call their families up to the elementary school and fought in front of a bunch of kindergartners, knives and everything. The cops were called. I think some of the parents are still in jail for gun possession parole violations. One of the kids was pulled from our school and put in foster care. The parents proceeded to call their families up to the elementary school and fought in front of a bunch of kindergartners, knives and everything. This sounds like a scene straight out of Family Guy. Teachers of Reddit, who was the worst parent you've ever had to deal with? A parent created an extremely extensive treatise on how the traditional methods of grading should be scrapped. They ended up emailing it to every staff member in the school. They did not, however, ever address the fact that their child did not turn in a single homework assignment between December and June. I'm not a teacher, but my wife was one in a poor area near Chicago. I've heard 100 horror stories, but the one I always think about is this one. My wife's school was having a really hard time involving their parents in their kids' homework. The kids on average have poor test scores, poor intelligence, low motivation, etc. common problems today. So what they tried to do was start an after school program where parents would come in and help their kids with their homework. Kinda defeats the purpose of homework, but whatever. None of the parents showed up. Not surprising, I suppose. Here's where it gets interesting. So they decided they were going to raffle off a ham at each after school homework event. Amazingly, parents started showing up. I would have to drive with my wife every once in a while to Walmart to buy a ham, because the parents showed up for a 1 in 500 chance to win a ham. They wouldn't come in for their kids, but they'd come in for a freaking chance at ham. Blows my mind to this day. I do private tutoring for the Scions of Privilege in Manhattan, so I have a lot of crazy parent stories. But the worst, by far, I was working with a Jewish family. The parents were pretty standard issue Reform Jews, not particularly religious. The son, who was a high school junior, was in the midst of exploring pretty serious ultra-Orthodox Judaism. He changed his name. I forget what to. I only met with his family once. For reasons you'll see below. His mother continued to call him his old name, even though it made him visibly upset. So I had been hired to work with him on the essay for the SAT, which is kind of ridiculous in and of itself, as it's a trivial part of the test, but this family was rolling in money and didn't care. At the time, I worked for a pretty prominent test prep company based out of Manhattan, so I was using their materials. I had previously actually run a big part of research and development for the company, so I had been in charge of making the materials we were using, and had written a fairly significant amount of the advice myself. I sit down with the son and get ready to start to work with him. The mom sits down at the table with us. I quickly explain that I prefer to work one-on-one with the student, and that I'd be happy to answer any questions she might have after the session is done. She insists that I'm paying. I want to learn. To the poor kid just sighs. So I start. I'm explaining things. Every couple of minutes, the mom interrupts and points to something in the book and says, "What about that sentence there? Why don't you read that to him? I want you to say that to him. I wrote that sentence. Mom, what I'm giving now is more in-depth and nuanced than what is in the book." This went on for the entire session, with the mother trying to tell me what to do, the son sighing and rolling his eyes and asking his mother to please leave, and Mike trying to give this kid more information than is in the pages of a test prep manual and trying to get the mom to leave us alone. And the end of the session, the mother asked when we should schedule our next appointment. I politely tell her that there will be no next appointment because I can't work with them. What? But you were wonderful. And that was the first time, but not the last time, that I fired a client. I know I was. You take care now. Not a teacher now, but I had direct field experience as a sophomore in college. One class I sat in for a few months was a kindergarten class. Those kids were the sweetest, most wonderful kids around. There was Colin, who loved burritos. Lisa, who wanted to learn to dance like a robot. Chris, who after seeing me, a guy with long hair, decided he wanted to grow his hair out. Then there was Alyssa. Alyssa is just another case of many in America, where parents plumb didn't give a crap about the growth of their kids. Alyssa was tall for her age. She had been held back, and unusually quiet. She was sweet-natured, but always sat by herself. I made it a point to interact with her, but in those few months I was in her class I never heard her talk. One day, the kids were to bring me their easy readers one at a time and read them to me. Whenever Alyssa came to the desk, I had asked her to get started, only to be met with a confused look. The teacher's aide hinted to me that I read it with her, which I did. Afterward, I found out that Alyssa's parents never read to her or helped her with her schoolwork. They never came to any school functions, and the teacher also told me that she had contacted CPS when the poor girl showed up to school with some pretty sizable bruises. She wasn't held back due to developmental issues. Her parents were always late getting her ready for school, and as a result if she missed her bus they wouldn't take her to school. Apparently on this note the teacher went to the parents and had a come to Jesus meeting with the parents because they were getting her to school on time and more often. I never found out what happened after my time was up. Alyssa cried when I left. I hope things got better for her, and I hope she was taken out of that home. Frick those types of parents. Being a parent is awesome, but those types of people can't seem to grasp that. Useless wastes is what they are. Local drug kingpin. unconvicted, knew exactly how much he was legally allowed to mentally and physically abuse his daughter. I got nowhere with social services. Probably murdered her mother. Never indicted. No witnesses. Sorry for the terseness, but I hate thinking about it. I was teaching high school in the South Bronx at the time. A student of mine had just assaulted another and I had to physically restrain him until school security showed up. As I held him back, and he wasn't a small kid, he called the dean a freaking CB. Obviously, we had to call his mom in. The first thing she said when we sat down was, "How did you all get my number? I thought I gave you a fake one." She proceeded to give no fricks about the fact that her son was on the verge of expulsion. He didn't come back to school the following year. Currently doing illegal private tutoring and career as an ESL teacher. The worst parent I've dealt with so far are the family that I currently work with. While the mother and father are easily one of the sweetest and nicest people I've met, they are extremely wealthy and tend to spoil the crap out of their 2 elementary kids. They have a really fat little 5-year-old boy that is the most spoiled crap in the universe. This chubba hubs throws tantrums every day during lessons, hits and screams at his parents and grandparents, cries over everything, and eats a crap ton of food every day, and his parents just smile and laugh over all of it. They've never disciplined him. They've never told him no. This crap gets a new toy every week, on demand. This little sucker can't stand doing anything he doesn't want or he'll run to his parents crying. I used to teach this little boy who was so disruptive he would shout and pinch the other children in the class. And when I complained to his parents, they said that he was a little angel at home and were shocked that I was saying that their boy was disruptive. They even said they thought I had the wrong child's parents in. Former teacher here, Chris' grandmother, who became his legal guardian not too long before this story, takes the cake for me. Background: I taught at an alternative high school for students who were not successful in the traditional high school setting. Kids with drug problems mostly, but there were a few outliers to that, Chris being one. Although he was fairly high functioning for his placement, Chris was classified special education and was legally allowed to sit in on his PPT, planning and placement team, meetings to discuss his IEP, individualized education plan. It was at the PPT meeting in April to discuss the upcoming school year that my heart broke for this kid so badly. We were discussing Chris' progress in the current school year and I was being very optimistic about Chris' upcoming school year as I felt that he made tremendous progress and could continue to do well if the proper support was in place. I made the suggestion that Grandma help to facilitate a positive learning environment at home in order to provide Chris with the best chance to succeed, and her exact response was, "I'm not changing anything at home. The kid is stupid and he's going to keep being stupid no matter what I do for him at home." He was sitting right next to her and I could see all the joy leaving his face like a balloon slowly being deflated. I never wanted to adopt a child so badly in my life as I did Chris to get him out of yet another toxic home situation. Oh man, I have a couple. I worked at a chain childcare center. In the first few weeks I was there was a notice on my classroom door and one we had to send home to every family because a child in the center had scarlet fever. What is this, the Middle Ages? Scarlet fever essentially is strep throat that goes untreated. Mom refused to take the kid to a doctor, so the entire center was exposed. A mother that was arrested for showing up at the center and tried to pick up her kid despite her having a restraining and no contact order to see her kid. That was fun explaining to a classroom of 4-year-old who witnessed that. Consoling a child who was crying because she was sad about something. I don't remember what, but she was 3 so it was probably important to her. I went over to console her and all she could tell me was not to tell her mom she was crying because when I cry, mommy hits me for crying, my first mandatory reporting. As a guy, it was really hard not to after the parents for that one. Here's a thing about boys, especially when they are in the 3-5 age range, they like to wrestle. No, not fight. Gang up on. Beat each other up. Wrestle. I had rules. Had to be outside. On the grass. Not biting, kicking or punching, and if one person cries it's over. It worked brilliantly. The kids learned boundaries when before they had none. They are going to wrestle. So instead of outlawing it altogether, which was untenable, I put safety rules in place and they were always monitored. Helicopter, my son is an angel despite the fact that I know he's a little butthole. Mom sees this going on one day and tells the director I'll let her son get ganged up on and beat up. Her son was like 6 in class full of 3-4-year-olds. And he was getting ganged up on? No lady, you're moron. I was working in Saudi Arabia about 8 years ago and I had one kid who was the cousin of someone who was the cousin's cousin of the Prince of Saudi Arabia. He came the first day and signed up for the class and I never saw him again. In fact, I actually removed him from the attendance. At the end of the course he showed up the last day to collect his diploma. I told him he wasn't getting one because he didn't attend a single class. He stormed out of the class calling me names the entire way. A few hours later this little crap shows up with half of Saudi Arabia. His mother, father, uncles, aunts, brothers, the whole dang family. I was called into the office by the dean and spent the next 30 minutes being screamed at by my boss, half the staff, and his belligerent family. Didn't I know who he was? How dare I not give him what he asked for? I was docked a month's pay and I ended up quitting 2 months later. Oh, and he graduated the class, with honors of course. There are those who understand the benefits of an education, and then there are those who understand the benefits of having a piece of paper that says you are educated. So long as those two people do not meet, no one ever knows. My teacher in high school told me this story. A little background into my teacher. He was no nonsense teacher, not scared to discipline anyone and not fearful of anyone. He taught in a city in some of the toughest areas, taught English and was incredibly smart. 2 PhDs and a master's. There was a teacher-parent conference that usually was in the evenings to give the parents a change to visit after work. It was running late into the conference and there was one last parent to see. The parent was of a lovely female student. Let's call her Mary. My teacher opened the door, let the parent leave the classroom and called the last parent in. He went to the doorway and called out the name and went back to sit at his desk to prepare for the last interview. To his surprise he noticed a tall guy in a dark suit with dark glasses standing at the doorway. He wasn't sure what to make of it. It wasn't a cop. He had no gun. He just stood there at the door, in attention and looking at all the surroundings. A few seconds pass and he seems to give the okay and the last parent came. It turns out that it was the grandfather of Mary. The grandfather was not too tall, but the serious type, straightforward but pleasant. My teacher reviewed Mary's progress. He was honest, had positive and negative feedback, not batting an eye and without fear of who he was talking to. The grandfather paid careful attention, asked a few questions and at the end of the short discussion paused a few seconds and said, "You know Greenberg, I like you. You don't take no crap. I'm glad you're Mary's teacher. I want to tell you that you can walk the streets of New York safe." My teacher responded, "Well, thank you." They shook hands and the gentleman left. As he was getting ready to leave, a few of the teachers ran to his room. "Do you know who that was?" My teacher responded, "No." "Should I know who he is?" They responded, "That's one of NYC's biggest mobsters. That's John Gotti. This was back in the 80s when he was really popular." To which my teacher responded, "Oh, okay, well that's nice. He was a lovely fellow." My wife is a teacher and had a kid who kept asking to stay after school. This puts my wife home late, but she cares about her job so she kept doing it and tutoring him. Except that she noticed this kid doesn't really need any help. He did all his homework, did just fine on the tests, and she thought maybe he just had a confidence problem. So she asks him one day and he said his mom tells him he needs to go. So she tried to boost the kid a bit by saying, "You don't have to come tomorrow. Tell your mom that I said you are doing just fine and should enjoy your off hours from school. It's just as important." Something like that. Then my wife gets called down to the office the next day to discuss this insanely long crapfire email from the mom to the principal, who said that my wife is actively denying her son a fair chance at learning or some crap. Well, anyway, dig it down and sum it up. Statements back and forth. Then the mom starts crapfire with another one of his teachers with the same issue and the whole cycle began again. They eventually got her to admit that she was trying to keep her son at school because she was physically locking him out of the house until she got home from work. This is easy. This was over 35 years ago. I once had twin girls in my sophomore general business class. They were nice girls. Didn't talk much. It didn't take me long to realize that they were struggling. They never completed any quizzes or tests, just returned the papers blank. No homework. I tried contacting the parents, couldn't reach them. Talked to the principal, the counselor, the social worker. No luck. Finally I went to the house. The girls were there alone. Said their mother was at the store. I stopped back at the house a couple of times later in the week. Still nothing. Eventually the girls didn't show up in class and the principal said they had left school. I never met this parent, but she was definitely the worst one I ever had to deal with. Jay's mom. This story is a colleague's. The science teacher said, for this unit, I'll be taking you all to Mars. Jay's mom comes in person, yelling about how ain't her kid going to know Mars. She ain't give permission for that. True story. You signed Ms. Frizzle's permission slip so we're all going. Not me, but my wife. She teaches 5th grade. There is a child who regularly comes to school smelling like fesses. When asked if she needs to go to the restroom or anything, she'll just say no and deny any mess when asked in private. On 1 or 2 occasions, she's gotten up from her seat, and there has been a urine puddle that she's been sitting in. She claims that she's possessed, and will never do any work. She has constant outbursts, where she will say she's going to kill herself or other students. My wife has tried everything with the school counselor and school psychologist to rectify any issues, taking it as far as contacting DCFS. This includes involving the parents, but the parents equals just mom, as she has full custody of the girl for some reason. She claims the dad is a danger to the girl. However, my wife has met the dad, who is trying to get legal custody now, and says he's in a much better situation to take care of this child. Mom will not get involved. She will set appointments to appease the administrators and then she doesn't show up. In emails, she will say she's going to get the daughter some counseling or other mental health assistance, but never does. The school psychologist had the state mental health dep to prescribe medications to control her myriad of issues, but the mom won't buy them, because they're too expensive. However, she then shows up to class yesterday with 2 store-bought cakes and other stuff for the kids to eat for the girl's birthday. As unfortunate and sad that this is, the sweet taste of Walmart cakes is not stronger than the odors and mental state of this girl. She has been destroyed by her mother. I'm an assistant faculty at a major university and teach organic chemistry labs. Because of the size of the labs, the course sections are largely taught and graded by teaching assistants. One day, one teaching assistant noticed that a paper had been turned in by a student he didn't have, who we'll call Mary. He also was missing a paper from his student, who I shall call Bob. The TA tracked down Mary's TA to talk about it. What they discovered is that Bob and Mary had been turning in identical papers for the entire year, only switching the name at the top. Because of how large the university is and because we didn't use any type of plagiarizing checking software at the time, it's purely by luck that we caught this. Submitted the work to the Academic Integrity Board, thought it was a pretty clear-cut case and that they'd get XFs on their transcripts, and wiped our hands of the situation. Turns out, Mary's dad is a lawyer. He argued the legality of our syllabus and how plagiarism isn't clearly defined enough for the students and that we couldn't produce sufficient proof of who cheated off of who, though our policy states anyone involved shall receive equal punishment. Full stop. As opposed to going to court and letting the legal fees build up, the Academic Integrity Board caved and told us to simply alter the transcript to show that Mary had withdrawn from the course. Bob was left to burn. Not me, but my mom, in her 3rd or 4th year of teaching, was given a student with Downs. While not generally an issue for my mom, this student was functioning at level of a 6-month-old child. Sarah had 2 full-time aides, physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech, and many other special services, while being fully included in normal day-to-day classroom activities. When Sarah was in the classroom, she would constantly scream from her desk at the back of the room, while the aide would try to get her to quiet down. In an attempt to get her to communicate, they gave her a speech board with buttons she could press to get what she wanted. The buttons had her favorite foods on them, so when Sarah wasn't screaming, you had the speech board yelling out chicken nugget, Doritos, chicken nugget. There were instances where she would eat her Doritos, masturbate, and then lick her fingers clean. She also could not use the restroom and was in diapers, which had to be changed by the aides. So why was this student in a normal education classroom instead of a special day class? Her parents sued the school district to force her into the general education classroom via multiple lawsuits, not just against the school district, but against Sarah's teachers as well. Any negative word about their daughter's capabilities, they would start a lawsuit. At every IEP, there were more lawyers than school staff. During one IEP, they asked what my mom was teaching in English. She said they were reading Maniac McGee, which was about racism. They asked her how she was going to modify her curriculum to accommodate Sarah's needs, to which she responded, "I cannot teach about racism to a 6-month-old. The lawyers asked Sarah's mom how she could modify her curriculum to explain racism, and the mom said give her a piece of white paper and a piece of black paper and have her tear them up. The mother would randomly show up at school and watch the classroom to see that their daughter was being included. Kids reading a book popcorn style. Sarah had to have a chance to read as well. Sarah's aide covering Sarah's mouth to get her to be quiet. Complain to the school. Get the aide fired. File a lawsuit against the school for not providing the aides required in the last lawsuit, and a lawsuit against the aide for harming their daughter. The parents were just unwilling to accept the situation that their child would not be going to college and would be lucky to ever be able to get a job. They had a son as well who was actually pretty smart, but he was ignored and his sister's educational needs placed above his own. The parents had zero involvement in his schooling, which was really sad. My mom ended up doing a good enough job to not get sued, but she had multiple aides either get fired or quit due to the situation. It was a nightmare for that entire year, with my mom coming home crying every night. Worst experience in her 20 years of teaching. My first few years teaching in Baltimore, I worked in a pretty crappy school, but I loved the students and kind of thrived in the organized chaos. It didn't always work out though. I had a student, we'll call him Mike. Mike was a pretty popular guy who was in a crew of dudes who were all perfectly nice, but were more focused on how to not come to class and rep their crib set in the halls. Mike was in my English 4 class, a 90-minute period that was split with a lunch period. Students would come to class for 45 minutes, go to lunch, and come back for 45 minutes. It wasn't the best idea administratively, but out of my hands. Mike would show up for the first 45 minutes, and then never come back. He did this every day, for a year. I called his home, sent letters home via the main office, requested conferences via progress reports and report cards. We can check a box per student requesting their parent come in. I never heard back, not once, until graduation requirements. Mike had obviously failed my class, and students cannot graduate without 4 completed English credits. All of a sudden his mother, father, aunt, and grandmother were in the office screaming at the principal. I was called down, told to bring my contact records. I brought my binder of attempted calls, summaries of messages I left, dates I sent letters home, and reminded the principal that I requested parent-teacher conferences on progress reports and report cards. I wasn't out to fail Mike, but Mike failed, and the other students that worked extra hard to pass deserved to graduate where he essentially fricked off every day and didn't. I said it in nicer terms than that. Anyway, the parent turned what would become an hour-long meeting into a screaming match where she and the other family members claimed the only reason I was failing her son is because I'm racist. I'm white. 99.9% of the student population in the school was black, and she said some really offensive and heinous crap. Mike sat there silently, but wouldn't make eye contact. My principal did nothing to fire back, even though he considered me a strong and fair teacher. Instead, after an hour, he manually changed all 4 quarters of Mike's failing grades to passing so he could be the first child in their family to graduate high school. That was 6 years ago, and I don't know where Mike is today, but I do keep in touch with some of his peers that graduated. I can only hope he found a way to benefit himself and his city after school. Teachers of Reddit, what are your worst experiences with helicopter parents? Teacher at a private school in South Korea here. Every one of my students' parents is a CH-47 Chinook of a parent. So the courses I teach are specifically geared for the students who want to study in the United States during college. I teach classes to prepare them for the SATs. I teach English conversation to help them be more fluent, although most of them were pretty good with English to begin with. And I teach in an American university style to help them get used to the format. The thing is, I essentially have no control over grades. In principle I do because they are my classes, but the reality is totally different. Because it's a private school, every one of the parents pays money to get their kids in and pay a whole lot more for them to be part of this international program. This means that if their kid isn't doing well, they have a pretty good chance of packing them up and taking them to a competing school. So because of this, every one of my students gets near perfect grades. Not because they earned them, but because my principal has flat out told me that they all have to pass and do well even if they only ever sleep in class. And about half of them do. It's nice to know I'm not alone in my frustrations with the education system here. I had a parent come in with their child a year ago with one of those Wi-Fi cell phone radiation detector thingies, and during the first 5 minutes of class walked around the room, him in tow. She finally pointed to a seat for him to sit in, and then came up to me and asked if there was any way I could make the building maintenance staff aware that the radiation levels were still quite high. Also, had a different parent year before that ask me to not use both the chalkboard and whiteboard in any class. I can understand the chalkboard during class, because I have had kids with asthma who react, but the whiteboard, and ever? How did she expect me to teach? One of my mom's teacher colleagues had a parent call and complain because the teacher had written a note to the student in red pen. Apparently using the red pen came off as aggressive. They actually make purple pens for that very reason. Sheesh. I'm not a teacher, but I'm in high school and I directed some of the kids in my school's middle school division in a play of Treasure Island. One day, when we weren't allowed access into the theater, we did a rehearsal at the house of this girl, let's call her G. Her mother, let's call her M, invited us to come over. And at first I was wary as something always seemed a bit off about her, like she was always in an insane rush to get her daughter home after all of our regular rehearsals. But they had a very large house and I didn't want to give up the space, so I agreed to do the rehearsal there. Once we were there, M politely greeted us, but G was holed up in her room. I asked if she could come and join us, but M kept insisting we start the rehearsal without her. I explained to her that G was one of the most important parts of the play, and it would be hard to practice without her, but M just kept saying that she had work to do and wasn't available. Finally, after about half an hour, G came out to meet us, but her crazy mother told us that she could only stay for 15 minutes and then she had to go back to her work. G then turned to her mother and said, "I don't have any work," to which M responded, "Yes you do, sweetie," in the most passive aggressive way I've ever heard someone talk to their child. I decided to stay out of it, and we started rehearsing with her. I then opened my laptop to show them a video of what they did, but M happened to be walking past at the time, and she ran over and slammed my laptop, slid down, shouting "no media" repeatedly, and then lifted it up and ran away with it somewhere. It was my computer, so I followed her and asked for it back, and she carefully explained that they were a no media family and that it's important that G isn't exposed to that. She then said that her daughter should get back to work anyway, but I said we needed 5 more minutes. When I got back to G, she said, "Isn't my mom so annoying?" and I wasn't sure how to respond, but G saw the uncertainty in my face and kept talking about her mother. It turned out that G wasn't allowed to watch TV, go on any computer, even listen to music on an iPad, just do her schoolwork and read books that had already been read by her parents. She was in 6th grade, so of course she didn't have that much work to do, but her mother would make her study her notes from the day every day, and would frequently make her do homework again as it wasn't long enough. G could have been getting straight A's with less than half of the work she had to do, so I told M that she shouldn't put so much pressure on her daughter, and she responded to that by kicking me out of the house. Her parents got divorced a year later and her father has full custody, and I couldn't be happier. TLDR. Girl has crazy mom who makes her do schoolwork even when she has important commitments and doesn't have any schoolwork to do. Uncle was a teacher for 25 years at a fairly prestigious school and told me some fairly unbelievable horror stories. I'll just talk about the one that sticks out in my mind. He had taught several grades and at this point I believe he was teaching a 6th grade class. There was a boy in the class who was very, for lack of a better word, stupid. This isn't uncommon in schools, but this kid was simply thicker than brick and couldn't seem to grasp anything that was being taught to him. Catch 22 is he had a father who was the chief of police in town and mother who worked closely with the mayor. Anyways, my uncle had been teaching a chapter in history and assigning homework for day when the boy stood up and started yelling about how stupid history was and that my uncle was dumb for attempting to teach it to them. Needless to say, the boy was sent to the office for verbally abusing a teacher. This is where the story gets somewhat interesting. While the boy was in the office, he had begun crying and started to fabricate a story about how my uncle had called him an idiot outright in the classroom and that all he did was retort saying no I'm not jerk or something to that effect. He then began requesting to speak to his parents. Of course the headmaster obliged and let him call his parents and at the same time summoned my uncle to the office to discuss what was going on. 5 minutes later, as my uncle had just finished explaining what had happened, both the boy's parents burst into the office. Guns blazing if you will, not literally. The husband attempted to arrest him with his wife basically spitting in my uncle's face as she was yelling at him. All the while their boy was sitting there smiling and apparently laughing as my uncle was taken from the room by the chief of police. All pretty absurd. As you can imagine, with a full room of witnesses and the children. The actual story came to light fairly quickly, but instead of apologizing and trying to save face, the husband began telling a tale of how my uncle had resisted arrest and reacted forcefully and struck him as he was attempting to gain control over him in the office. I found out later that both the parents approached the headmistress after the fact and offered her an ultimatum to agree with what they were saying or they would make her life a living heck, all instead of simply admitting they were wrong. The husband lost his job and the wife was severely demoted to desk clerk after everyone figured she tried to use her position as leverage in the situation. And as if this whole thing wasn't humorous enough, my uncle still swears to this day nailing the headmistress saved my life. Definitely my career. What a lovely man he is. Your uncle is a BAMF. K-12 music teacher here. For discipline, I use the 3 strikes you're out method. With kindergarten I use the happy face sad face on the whiteboard, dependent upon behavior each day. I had a parent sneak into my classroom during my lunch period and erase his son's name from the sad face list on the board, claiming that he got a feeling while he was at work that his son was being mistreated at school. He could only believe that I had wrongfully accused his son of something, because his son was an angel. He picked the lock to come in and defend his son. Not a teacher, but I had a best friend growing up with very strange parents. They were nice people, but wanted to keep their children protected from everything. One day, when my friend and I were about 11 years old, we were changing into bathing suits in her bathroom. I noticed we were both starting to grow pubic hair, so I asked her if she knew what puberty was. She said yes. I asked her if she had her period yet. She was completely oblivious to what a period was. At age 11, that is pretty standard information. I have a very medically open family who taught me all the correct lingo, so I explained that a period was a normal thing that happened when you reach physical maturity, yada yada yada. Well, my friend's mother, I soon found out, liked to put her ear up to the door whenever we were in private. After we walked out of the bathroom, she scolded me, wagging her finger, saying there were some inappropriate and wrong things you never discuss with other people. I started crying because I didn't think that those things were wrong. She even called my mother and told her how inappropriate I was and said I needed to learn my manners. Here's the M. Night Shyamalan twist. 5 days later, my friend got her period. Could you have imagined how scared she would have been if I hadn't told her what it was? We even got a phone call from her mother apologizing. Moral of the story: teach your kids about their bodies, folks. I work in college housing. Last year, I worked at a small Midwestern university. The demographics are 90% white kids. A staff member was from Ghana and had set up this international student sponsorship program with the government officials. It was really awesome. The students weren't to arrive until a week or so after college classes started. I informed my student staff of this and also told them to inform their residents that people of different cultures have different customs, and to make sure they feel welcome to campus. I received a call from a mother shortly after student staff had their meetings, saying that her son was concerned that his new roommate would smell. I inquired further, and she said that her son told her that her new roommate was from an African country, and the mother did research online and found that international students tend to not bathe as frequently as Americans. She then suggested that we house them separately from the American students. I told her we do not assign rooms by race, ethnicity, physical orientation, etc. She again brought up housing them together. So I said something along the lines of, "Excuse me mom, but you're suggesting that we separate the African students from the American students. Do you recognize the historical significance of how utterly insulting this is?" Not me, but my girlfriend is a teacher, and last year one of her co-workers had a mom that was convinced that it wasn't her sweet baby who was the problem. It was the teacher, of course. So she asks the principal to sit in on the class and is allowed. This goes on for months, despite the teacher saying numerous times to the principal that the lady is crazy. The principal is more worried about the PTA than the teachers and lets her keep coming. Finally the teacher says if she is still here tomorrow I am leaving and not coming back until she is gone. The next day she was still there and the teacher left. The lady kept coming for 2 weeks of substitutes before the principal finally said she had to stop coming. Whoa, it only took 2 weeks for the principal to grow a pair. Some administrators never do throughout their entire career. I'm not a teacher, but I work in student affairs at a college, and we had a parent who called the president of the college because her daughter had not called her back in 12 hours. The student had gone out with friends the night before and forgotten her cell phone, so her mom called the school in a panic the next morning wanting us to track down her daughter, who's in college. We had an employee whose mother called her daughter's manager, tracked home phone via phone book, because the daughter stayed out all night at the work Christmas party and didn't call home. The daughter was 30 years old. I wasn't really a teacher, I worked in daycare, but they called me a teacher. Anyway, when my class was 2, I worked there 3 years, had the same class the whole time. For the most part, I had this one kid whose mother made me want to strangle her. In fact, I wanted to strangle the entire family. My boss had absolutely no spine and denied the parents nothing. So this one parent wanted me to track her son's entire day and write a log. Every day, if I didn't have at least a full sheet of paper, she would flip the frick out. I had to record every little thing this kid did, including every word he used, times, etc. And the kid was an absolute terror. He was a big, spoiled brute. He was bigger than most of the 4-year-olds. Initially I would include his behavior problems in his report, but the mom got so mad at me. Her angel couldn't possibly have hit little Jimmy in the head with a fire truck. Never mind that Jimmy has a goose egg on his forehead. I was just trying to blame my negligence on her child. Ugh. She was usually the very last parent to pick up, usually late, sometimes being as much as a half an hour after closing. And so I would normally be alone when I'd get the verbal lashing as I either opened the daycare or closed. Apparently the other teachers didn't get so much abuse as I did. The situation only stopped when another parent had been a little late as well and was taking their child to the bathroom before they left for home. He comes out with his daughter as this woman is calling me all sorts of horrible things because I forgot something in the note from the day before and blah blah blah. The dad is all horrified when he comes out with his daughter and the woman shuts up after that. After that point either he or his wife was always there until the big brute was picked up, and I think either he spoke to her or he spoke to my boss. But a few weeks later she pulls her kid out of the daycare. As far as I know he wasn't allowed back into any center in the area because of his mom and his biting. I just want to say thank you to all teachers reading this thread. I have a child in preschool and have witnessed some craziness myself. I went to pick up my kid and heard the teacher say to one of the moms, "Just so you know, the bottom of Chloe's shirt is a bit wet. She spilled some water while painting, but I dried it off as much as possible. No big deal, right?" And nice of the teacher to take the time to mention a tiny spill. Big freaking deal to this mom. I don't understand why that would have happened. This concerns me that my daughter isn't being supervised. This is a brand new shirt, are you friggin' kidding me? This is also, of course, the mom that has her 4-year-old still in diapers. Because she doesn't have an interest in potty training and I would never try to force her to do something she doesn't want to do. So at least once daily the teacher has to stop the class to go into the bathroom and change her. Teachers get far too little respect and pay for what they do. If society paid on the importance of a job, teachers would be on the top tier. There are very few jobs where the person can say, "Today I made a difference in someone's life," and teachers can say that almost every day. Getting a good teacher is like hitting the jackpot. The level of commitment and dedication they provide is remarkable. Often they know their students better than the parents do. After I witnessed the heli mom having a breakdown, I went home and emailed the teacher a note, just saying I wanted them to know how much I appreciate her and what an amazing job she does on a daily basis. I got a phone call from her in tears, thanking me and telling me how much that meant to her. If your child has a great teacher, take a moment to tell them that. It will mean the world to them. I really don't think most people fully grasp the amount of time and effort it requires to be in the teaching field. I hate hearing the smartasses say they have the easiest job, great hours and a summer vacation. How hard can it be? You try getting up in front of a group of 25 kids daily, all eyes on you, providing them with a meaningful education while catering to many completely different levels of knowledge and needs, making sure each and every person gets it, discipling, reading essays, grading papers, creating daily lesson plans that need to be molded to a curriculum, attending meetings, running conferences, communicating with parents, tutoring after school, changing classroom decor, purchasing supplies out of pocket due to budget cuts, all while having to stay meticulously organized and on top of things while maintaining family relationships on a salary that, for the most part, barely allows the average person to make ends meet, and tell me that these people don't deserve a couple months off in the summer. Thanks again, teachers. Your work is greatly appreciated. This one time we asked a child's father, who was, and probably still is, a high-ranking D agent, to give a speech to the students, and he showed up in a helicopter. I'm not a teacher, but that did actually happen when I was in school. The helicopter entrance was meant to get us excited, and it really did. Helicopters are awesome. Only awesome helicopter parent. Not a teacher, but I knew a guy in high school whose mom was like a dang Apache helicopter. She would hound teachers for any little thing that her son mentioned. She had most of the teachers scared or at least annoyed with dealing with her. That her son, who was a decent guy actually, though obviously spoiled, never had to deal with a dang thing. His mom had him take all the easiest classes as well so that he would be valedictorian, which he ended up getting, because our school was retarded and didn't weight advanced versus remedial classes. My uncle was a biology teacher at our school and told me how she would call every day to make sure what his homework assignments were, when tests were, why he got marked tardy, etc. Insane. My mom used to read over my papers and say that they were utter crap, that they read like a retarded person wrote them sometimes. She'd do this while hitting me. She'd then sit down and slowly write out an essay that I was supposed to turn in, all the while telling me how much of a disappointment I was. When I turned it in, it would be obvious that she wrote it. She was a lawyer, so everything that she wrote sounded cold, detached, and very, very legal. Her version never followed the prompt. She'd get lost in the formatting. Noteworthy in that the formatting that she used was not the one that we learned in class. I'd usually get a C or D when I turned in her versions. One teacher even wrote, "Don't get your parent to write this crap," right next to a big red D. She'd then beat me and said that I was a freaking retard for getting such a low grade. Whenever I managed to write a paper without her interference, I'd usually get a B or an A. Teachers would compliment me on my writing. She never did, though. Not once. She did the same thing when I was typing my Eagle Scout report. No matter what I wrote, it would be crap. I even copied a similar project's report word for word, just replacing a few words where needed. Apparently that was crap too. This was a report that was basically already passed by the council, but it wasn't good enough for her. I remember crying a lot. Eventually, she just wrote it herself. My Eagle ceremony was 15 minutes. I didn't invite any of my friends. The badge is now collecting dust under my dresser. I've never bothered to get it out from under there. I love Scouts, but I am not at all proud of my Eagle rank. When I think back to my project, I don't think of helping little kids in a Title I public school. I think of the crap my mom used to do. It remains one of the worst experiences of my life. Anyway, that's the worst helicopter parent that I know. Dang. It felt good to type that out. Not a teacher, but great helicopter parent story. One time my assistant's mother called me to say that her son had overslept, and he would be late to work. Homeboy's 27 years old, and does not live at home anymore. WTF kind of person would rather call his mother than his own manager to say he'll be late? Not a teacher, but I went to WVU my freshman year. During orientation, the residency halls had meetings with the students and the parents, individually. The student meeting went well enough. The students seemed to be smart enough to figure things out and asked good questions. However, according to my mom, during the parent meeting a woman asked, "Who will do my daughter's laundry?" Teachers of Reddit, what is a teacher-parent meeting that will haunt you for life? It was my first year teaching at an elementary school. Dad showed up with his son. This boy was a little shy in class and he was very bright and responsible. He had started the year below grade level and had worked hard to get on track. The dad was smelling strongly of alcohol, weaving and slurring his words. I called the office to have someone come down. We escorted them to the office and had him wait. He ended up getting sick in the trash can. I remember the look of embarrassment, anger and sadness on the son's face. I had other conferences scheduled so I couldn't stay long, but the police had to be called by the administration. The next day the son came in and said he was sorry. I told him I was proud of him and that I was sorry his dad was sick and that I hoped he felt better soon. That seemed to cheer him up a little. I sent home the progress report and great examples of his classwork. I did try to reschedule but it never happened. The worst of it was around the holidays this student would ask if he could come home with me, or he'd mention that he wished I was his mom. I told him that his family would miss him too much and he said no they won't. It broke my heart. He moved schools the following year. Was hoping for a Matilda kind of ending. Sadly number. Taught in an inner city school and had 160 students. 3 parents showed up for parent-teacher night. 3. So many parents would screen and never return my phone calls when their kid didn't turn in work or would skip class. It's hard to teach kids if the parents aren't on your side. I took too long wondering why this kid has 3 parents. My first year of teaching I had a mother who pretty much ignored everything I was saying and assumed it was all bad. I opened with, "Hey, your daughter has shown some excellent work in class this semester." She replies with, "I doubt that. She can't do anything." When I try and assure her she had in fact done well with proof, she dismissed it and said she will never be as good as her siblings. I then offered some advice for how to improve her already decent grade and the mother replies, "That's it, I'll ground her for a month." From that point on everything I said she literally added another month onto her daughter's grounding time. I ended up just summing up as quick as possible to try and save the daughter spending the rest of her life grounded. Called the parents because 8th grade student was bullying another student. Bullied student is confined to a wheelchair and I observed the bully throwing gum at him during class. Father comes in, but only speaks Spanish. Cape Verdean math teacher says he knows enough Spanish to translate. So we begin meeting with math teacher, myself, father of bully, and bully. Father, something in Spanish. Math teacher, what he is saying is that he admires your passion and bully interrupts. That's not what he's saying. He said you're a freaking liar. That's when I noticed how off dad looks. He angrily tells me something else before getting up, nearly flipping the table, and leaves. I ask the math teacher what he just said. He told me he didn't know. More unforgettable than haunting. I was teaching a very low ability group about Romeo and Juliet, and how I shall bite my thumb at them was an insulting thing to do. One of the children didn't understand what an insult was, and I, not thinking, said it's when you say something mean about someone. For example, if I said your mum smelled, then that would be an insult. Unfortunately, the child really took this to heart, probably increased by being from an Asian respectful to women background, and left the room in anger. I caught up with him and apologized, and let him know it was only an example and not me trying to be mean, and he seemed to accept that. However, the next day his dad came in, demanding a beating with me. He was furious that I had been insulting his wife in my lessons, and was out for blood. I made the same point that it was only an example and I wasn't implying his anything about his wife, and I crap you not. His response was, "I don't care. How do you know my wife doesn't smell?" At that point it took every ounce of control I had to keep a straight face, and the rest of the conversation is a vague memory. I eventually managed to pacify him, but I will never forget that meeting as long as I live. It seems this is a hot button topic in that household. I started to warn a parent that his son was hanging out with gang members and smoking pot. My assistant principal stopped me and pulled me into the hall, forbidding me to talk about gangs or suggesting son was taking drugs. Next year student was beaten to death with 2 others by home invaders who heard that they had a drug stash. One of the dead was another student of mine. He was a nice kid. This exact thing happened to my mom, except the kid was killed by the owner of the store he was robbing as an initiation into a gang. The school forbade her from attending the funeral, so she had to sneak to his family's home to give her condolences. I had to make a phone call home and tell her mother that her son called a girl a camel toe in class. Very uncomfortable conversation. Although I cuss like a sailor out of school, for some reason I have a hard time telling parents that their middle school age child said something like that in class. My first parent-teacher night was terrifying. Mom and dad walk in looking like they couldn't give a crap about being there. I've got my happy face on and tried telling them about what's been going on in the classroom. Finally I finish my spiel and dad says, "So, what's this about you calling my daughter tight pants?" I'm freaking out, flipping through my mind about what he could possibly be talking about. Last thing I want to be considered is a pervert as a male teacher at an elementary school. Then it hit me. On the first day of school, the class was sitting on the floor crisscross and her jeans were literally so tight she couldn't cross her legs on the floor. She looked like a weeble wobble trying to sit down. The class laughed and she was cool with it. All I said was, "Okay tight pants, do your best." I guess she told her parents in passing and their radar went off, which was appropriate. But after explaining the story and breaking a sweat, mom and dad gave off a suya without cracking a smile at the confusion. I guess that's understandable, but all I was thinking was frick you. I'm not trying to pull something with your 4th grade daughter. Maybe next time don't buy your 9-year-old jeans that prevent her from sitting crisscross applesauce. Mother sucker. Ha, crisscross applesauce. Maybe too late to the party, but I had one years ago where the father sprung on his 6th grade daughter that he'd be going to court to send her back to foster care. We do parent-teacher student portfolio conferences, so his daughter was there. Dude had spent years trying to get custody of his daughter who'd been in foster care. Mom was in jail for a variety of drug-related and violent offenses. Dad had a record as well, but not as bad. But while the dad's court battle to get custody of his daughter went on, he'd remarried, and when he finally got custody, things were instantly horrible between daughter and stepmom. In the conference, every positive thing I said, and I jettisoned every negative thing I could have said, because it was instantly clear that this girl needed support rather than criticism, was turned on its ear by dad. "Okay, so you've improved in math, but you still won't listen to anything your stepmom says." After a few of those, while my panic was rising, dad finally said to his daughter, "I won't let you tear my family apart. That's why I'm going to ask the judge in June to put you back in foster care." I was absolutely stunned. So was his daughter, who went in a split second from being a bit fiery having attitude about dad's criticisms to completely deflated. I tried some sort of lame way to spin it. "Well, you improved so much in the past few months. Let's talk a bit about why you improved so that we can hold on to those positive things no matter what happens down the road." But really I had nothing. I was pretty much the only one who talked after that, trying to say positive things, but there was no way to turn it around. So I said thanks for coming and ended the conference. That was in the 3rd to last week of the school year. She didn't show up for the last week and never came back to our school. I've always wondered what happened after that. I hope she's okay. Made an account to answer this. Many years ago a parent told us that her then adolescent son had been kidnapped by his non-custodial father as a toddler. He took him and lived a transient life. The boy was horribly abused and was told his mother was dead. When she was reunited with him, she had to show him the file she had kept detailing her search efforts over the years because he did not believe her. News stories, press, etc. Unfortunately, the boy was damaged mentally and emotionally to the point where he was physically attacking his family and tried to kill a baby in the house. I left that conference a sobbing, emotional wreck. I will never forget it. I had a student's mom come in to defend her 15-year-old son's complete lack of work in my class. She felt the need to let me know that he was a really great kid, despite doing next to nothing in drawing class but complaining and talking crap about everyone around him. It got weird when she recounted a story about overhearing him and his friend having a conversation about sex. According to her, the The fact that her son was still a virgin was testament to his upstanding character. I failed to see the connection between not yet having had sex and not doing any drawing in drawing class. Teacher here. This happened about 10 years ago. A parent once popped by to chat with me. I think it was during lunch or something, because I was alone in my room. He was concerned that his son was failing. I was explaining what assignments the kid was missing, and dad started getting very heated. Not angry, upset, but agitated and loud. The louder he got, the more physical his gestures. Since I hadn't been expecting him, I was loading some stuff into a closet in my room when he showed up, and pretty soon he had me boxed into the closet, speaking sternly, not exactly yelling, shaking his finger in my face. I am not a small woman at 6 feet tall, but he was bigger than me, angry, in my space, and preventing me from leaving. I was flustered enough that I couldn't really think clearly enough to take back control of the situation. I can't say that I specifically was fearing for my safety, but I was sort of in that deer in the headlights mode, where I could see oncoming disaster but couldn't move out of the way. This was during school hours, and another student walked in, saw what was happening, turned around and booked it. At first, I thought he thought the situation looked inappropriate and I was having some sort of assignation in my classroom during school. Goodbye career. But he actually went and got other staff. Thank God. They interrupted the incident, and dad stepped back. As soon as he took a step back, I think he realized what he'd been doing, and how his behavior was pretty scary. Like I said, I don't think he was mad at me specifically, just the situation. And all he wanted was the best for his special needs son. It was pretty clear that, once he took a literal step back from the situation, he was pretty appalled at himself. I didn't hear from him again, and the kid transferred out, unrelated to the incident, a couple of months later. I just provide childcare at a school after school hours, but I had to tell a mother that her junior kindergartner, 4-5 years old, had gotten so mad that she'd said, "I'm going to go out and get a gun and shoot everyone and then myself." This kid was mad because her older sister, kindergartner, 1 year older, had been taunting her in really subtle and creative ways, like complimenting everyone else but not her. The little one had also copied the gun thing from her big sister, who has said that before because she likes to say violent things and laugh. The mom's face just fell when she realized I was talking about the little one. They are both unbelievably intelligent and articulate, but the little one hadn't had problems saying violent stuff like that before. Middle school teacher here. I've got a few, but here's my most recent. White student and black student got into a fight. It had nothing to do with race, and everything to do with 8th grade boys being dumb. But when the white kid's dad comes to pick him up, he says, "Well, maybe he wouldn't have got in trouble if you hadn't sat him next to a colored boy." This was a few weeks ago, not a few decades. I had a parent tell me her ex-husband kept accusing her of being a lesbian. I have no idea how it came up in the conversation. So about Jimmy's maths score, my ex-husband thinks I'm a lesbian. I'll never forget how one mother demanded that I give her daughter an A because giving her a B will ruin her chances of getting to a top tier college. She told me that I have no compassion and consideration for her future. Her daughter barely participated in class, and honestly she was not the brightest bulb in the room. I still cringe every time I remember her sense of entitlement. When my wife was student teaching, she had a parent come in and demand the same thing. If their son didn't get an A, he'd never get into college. She was student teaching 4th grade. Apparently straight A's in grade school is all that colleges look for during admission. My parents were once called to a parent-teacher meeting because my grade 1 self brought a deck of Chippendales playing cards to show and tell. In my defense, I thought they were magicians because they had on top hats and bow ties. My father was an elementary teacher for 38 years and had one that topped them all. My father is white, and one year he had a student that was barely doing any work, incredibly disruptive in class, and happened to be black. This kid's older brothers were notorious at the school for similar behavior. When my dad had the student's father to come in to discuss his son, the father erupted. He immediately accused my dad of being racist and refused to look at any paperwork my dad had on him. For a 3rd grade teacher, my dad handed out a ton of worksheets, and was absolutely meticulous with tracking his students. So there was a substantial paper trail for a freaking 3rd grade student. He began showing up after school to pick up his kids, something he had never done before, and yelling in the hallway that my dad was racist. Of course, the accusation of racism went through the district quickly, and the father got the California NAACP involved. After several months of bulls, during which my dad kept teaching this kid, the district came to the conclusion that my dad was not racist. The kid just needed help. The NAACP agreed, and the president of the California chapter personally apologized to my dad for getting involved with the wild accusations of the father. They also discovered why the father refused to look at any paperwork about his son. He was illiterate and wanted to hide it, so acted belligerent so he wouldn't have to admit it to others. My father retired a few years later, mostly due to health reason, but I knew this took a lot out of him. The whole time through, I don't think he was mad at anyone, maybe the NAACP for getting involved, and was mostly just sad that this kid and his brothers were clearly not going to get the help they needed. My literature teacher likes to tell a story about talking to a student's mum, who she was friends with, and was talking about how difficult it is dealing with students that don't want to learn. So the poor kid's mum says to him, "Jacob, stop being a C." We had a meeting with a mom of a student who was diagnosed with severe ADHD. I'm talking couldn't sit in a chair for more than 3 seconds. We asked why he wasn't medicated since he struggled so severely, and it really hurt his own academics, as well as the victims of his distractions. She broke down crying, telling us that she had been gang raped, and then gone so crazy she has been institutionalized. She then shared with us that while in the state institution they treated her like a guinea pig and tested her on every drug under the sun, resulting in her being in a zombie-like state. This student's dad is in jail for life, so they were under the care of CPS at the time. So, because of the zombie-like issue with how the institution medicated her, she says she will never medicate her son. He runs wild through the school, often hurting other children, and we can't do anything. The other most haunting conference, Mom couldn't come to school because she had recently had a stroke. We have this little boy who you can't help but love to death, even though he does the opposite of everything you ask, but you can tell he's seen a lot in his 12 years. Anyway, things were getting pretty bad, as he had thrown a desk at another kid in my classroom. So, we had the aunt come to school for a parent conference. She shared with us that when our student was 6, he watched his uncle murder his daddy. She also shared that he says he can't wait to do his uncle like his uncle, did his daddy. One day, I teach in an urban school and hold a lot of parent conferences, so these stories could easily continue. More stories please. This is one of the most interesting posts in the thread. When I was in junior high, my grandfather had his favorite take my little brother and I to a parent-teacher conference because he was too drunk to drive. I didn't tell anyone for the longest time. Generally, I get along very well with my students' parents, even the parents of students who require a lot of redirection and heart-to-heart conversations about their behavior. Even the parents that other educators tell me don't care about their children. Over the years, I've found that the vast majority of parents care about their children, and as long as I do a good job of showing them that I also care about their child's success, we get along great. I try to approach our conversations as an ally, in the effort to help their kid to do well in life. I finally had a meeting where I felt like the parent did not have the child's best interest in mind, and it broke my heart. It wasn't cool, the authorities abusive, but I quickly realized that anything I said would be used to manipulate my students at home. So I just ended the meeting as quickly as possible, making only very general comments. It was a downer. I told this story once before on Reddit, so forgive me for those who have read it before. I am a former teacher. I still work with youth, so I see an awful lot of parents, good and bad. When I was a teacher, a few years ago, the school was holding parent-teacher conferences. Mind you, this was middle school, so we held conferences with our advising groups and had a folder of work that we had compiled from other teachers. So I start going through this folder of work. This kid is a quiet kid who struggles with staying focused and daydreams a lot, but is otherwise not a bad kid or anything. We get to a science test where he missed like several points because of kind of dumb mistakes, and the dad took the time to go through each problem he missed and rework the problems with his son. So I am thinking, wow, here's a parent who is really invested in his son's education. You go, dad. And then it happened. He flips to the next paper, which was some daily assignment from language arts. The assignment was done and everything. He had gotten something like an 85% on it. But this paper had some remarkably intricate doodles on it. They were actually really beautiful. The dad sees this paper and without a moment's hesitation, he backhanded his son. It was hard enough that the kid got a bloody nose. Father proceeds to scream at him about how his stupid drawings were distracting him from learning, and how if he ever sees him drawing again unless he's making straight A's, there will be heck to pay. Just flipping out and berating him hardcore. I tried calming him down by saying that maybe enrolling him in the art class would give him an outlet for his talent and it wouldn't distract him so much. And then the dad gets up in my face, like, we are almost nose to nose, and he starts screaming that I am a stupid bee who doesn't know crap about raising children. You know, I just have a degree in child psychology and education. But what do I know about kids and their needs? I was freaking speechless. I was a first year teacher and I hadn't had anything like this happen before. So I grab the bleeding, crying kid's hand and take him to the office. Dad tries to yank me back in the room. In the scariest teacher voice I could muster, I said that if he laid a hand on me or the kid again, he would leave this building in handcuffs. I brought the kid to the office, had the secretary call the police, and made my first ever report to DCFS. Because, you know, he had slapped his kid in front of a mandated reporter. Former preschool teacher here. Parent-teacher meetings always stressed me out, and more often than not they took up the entire week. After a particularly challenging one midweek I decided to blow off some steam and hit up a dance club I frequent on occasion. So I'm basically dressed like a skank, a wee bit drunk, and grinding all over the sexy menfolk. One guy in particular caught my eye and we ended up making out pretty heavily. We talk, I enjoy him, and I invite him back to my place. A really stand-up guy. He explains that he would love to, but wanted me to know that he's in an open marriage, and, while his wife is cool with his having dates and girlfriends, he's not looking to replace her or get involved, etc. Suffice it to say that kinda killed it for me, but we still talked well into the evening and parted on good terms. You do see where this is going, right? Fast forward the next evening to parent-teacher conference for one of the newer girls in my class. I'd met mom several times during drop-off, but when the guy whose tongue I'd had down my throat not 24 hours before walked in, I nearly shat myself. What followed was the most awkward parent-teacher meeting I'd ever had, including ones where I've had to talk with parents about why their kids can't tweak each other's penises, a game they called penis tickle, which ultimately led to a discovery of an abusive relative. A child who wouldn't use the bathroom, but would poop in his hand and hide it behind the fish tank. This happened several times, and the fact that it isn't abnormal for their child to fall asleep whilst humping the living heck out of Bunny, the soft plushie she'd had since birth. Those were difficult, but coming face to face with a dad who knows I secretly like to be tied up and spanked haunted me for a long time. I should stop reading after yours, BC. I can't imagine any others being better than this one. Not parent teacher but parent brownie leader, girl guide Girl Scouts, interaction. The leader was on the way into the hall for brownies that night and was approached by the father of one of her new kids. He grabs her, holds a knife to her throat, and starts screaming at her for not making her kid a sixer, which is the kid who is in charge of a small group of brownies. Normally they only get that title after they've been at brownies for a few years and they're older. She had only just started. He says that if she doesn't make his daughter a sixer that night, he'll come back and kill her next week. Needless to say, she walked into the hall, told all the kids to not come back next week, and that she was closing the unit down. People are crazy. Teachers, what was the worst parent-teacher interview you've ever had to sit through? Preschool teacher here. My first year as a LEDs teacher I had a student who bit, scratched, pulled hair, slapped and punched both students and teachers, including myself. Every day we were essentially beaten up by this 4-year-old. Leading up to the conference my boss advised me to keep a log of everything this child was doing. Each time he slapped or bit someone, each time he yelled out a cuss word, etc. The entire conference was this child's mom going through my behavior log of her child and laughing. She told me that he had never exhibited that kind of behavior and was a perfect angel. She told me she had never even seen him angry. She laughed in our faces. Minutes later, the child's grandmother, whom the parent and child lived with, called the school and told me all the things she knew her daughter wouldn't, which included the child giving the grandmother bruises, banging her head into her headboard, dropping books on her feet, biting, scratching, pulling, and punching both his mom and the grandmother. Oh, I got one. Not a teacher, but I remember as a kid I went to a parent-teacher conference with my dad for my older brother. He went to a pretty bad high school in a rough area, so for one of the classes, the mother ahead of us goes with her son. Her son was this big, scary looking, gangster kid. This is the mid-90s in NYC. The teacher looks up at them and says, "I'm sorry, I have no idea who he is. He's never shown up to class and cuts every day." The mom turns her head and looks at the son and I see him go from having this smug, nonchalant attitude to having the fear of God suddenly on his face. The mom takes an umbrella and starts beating the kid right in front of the teacher. The teacher gets immediately flustered, but has no idea what to do. The kid starts apologizing profusely to his mom and to the teacher. His mom then grabs him by the ear. She's at least a couple inches shorter than him, and drags him out of the classroom. The whole time the kid is just saying he's sorry. Heck hath no fury like a mother scorned. I was senior management at a private school and we had some insane helicopter parents who insisted their 4-year-old daughter was a genius. They wanted her fast-tracked 3 grades ahead. Nobody could reason with them and they carried this big binder of tests they'd paid for to prove their case. Now, she was a sweet kid but very shy and seriously afraid of failure. Huge red flags, to be honest. They were at the point of suing us and I drew the short straw for talking them off the ledge. It was last day of the school year. My own kids were waiting for us to start the holidays. They went to the same school, and I was stuck for 2 hours with them, trying to persuade them that they were damaging their child and that moving an already nervy little kid away from the few playmates she had would be catastrophic. I went through every test paper, used every tactic I could think of and eventually called the meeting to a close on an agree to disagree basis, but refusing to move her higher up. The next day, first day of the holidays, my director got an entire transcript of the conversation which they'd secretly recorded and a demand to have me fired. They must have stayed up all night as it was before auto-transcribe tech was available. My director called in the lawyers and I had to forward all the slanderous emails they kept sending me in case of court action. We had an internal tribunal with them when school opened after the holidays and they lost their case. We never saw them again as they moved out of the area. I often think about that little girl and hope she's doing okay. Forcing a child into a class grade they're unprepared for is an excellent way to set them up for failure. I was a teacher at a private tutoring company that catered to children with autism and dyslexia who had major problems with reading. It was expensive, like $140 an hour, and children were required to do at least 4 hours a day, 5 days a week. It comes out to like $2k a week. Anyway, I was sitting in one of the PT conferences with some of the admins, and the conference turned from their child's progress to how they were going to pay for it. It was horrifying to hear that these parents are planning on taking a second mortgage out on their house, that they've sold some jewelry. This damned company was driving people into the ground financially. I quit about 2 weeks later. 20 hours would be like $2,800 a week. Crazy expensive. Preschool teacher here. Had to call CPS on a family, then have a parent-teacher conference with them after they already knew it was me. Pretty terrible. Looking back, I can't believe my employer put me in that position. I had a model student conference after 2 really tough conferences, so I was looking for a breath of fresh air and assumed his parents were as awesome as their child. I was wrong. They had decided to get a divorce right before conferences. They spent the entire conference arguing over who would have to take their child. More than once in my career I wanted to adopt a child, and this tops the list. I saw him a few years later and he was the same confident, thoughtful, intelligent kid. My wife's first teaching job was at a rural high school. Most of the parents couldn't be located or contacted, so it was a miracle when they would show up for parent-teacher conferences. One student, the oldest of 6, had not turned in any work and failed every test. It took several attempts, but his parents were finally able to come in. My wife met with them and her principal joined her, as I guess this family had a history in the town. My wife expressed her concern for the kid's future and his goals beyond school. The parents screamed at her and the principal, saying they were successful without a high school diploma and didn't believe their kid needed to be here. The only reason they were making him go was because CPS had threatened to take him away from them. My mom went to high school with a girl in a similar situation. She'd missed a ton of school because she was always being put upon to skip and take care of her 5 younger siblings. The second she turned 18, she packed a suitcase, dropped out of high school, and hitchhiked across the country, never to be heard from again apart from a short series of letters to my mom through college. I've posted this before. Knew that a mother was writing all of the essays her son was supposed to be doing. She has been doing it for years. Told her in the parent-teacher interview that the work didn't seem like it was his, given that it was well written BS and fluff, while he could barely string 2 sentences together in class, but that it was so poorly done given what the assignment was asking for that it wasn't worth investigating for plagiarism. I've talked to his teachers this year. Apparently nothing has changed. My mom does this with my little brother and tries to make me write them for him. It sucks. Thanks for at least trying to call her out on it. I had to inform them that it wasn't in fact a parent-teacher conference. Student asked to meet to discuss his recent exam grade. Cool. He shows up basically being dragged in by his mom, who proceeds to rant at me for a solid 5 minutes about how unfair the test must be because her special little guy, her words, couldn't possibly deserve a C. He was a junior in college and I was his TA. When she finally let me speak, I informed her that I didn't meet with parents and it was actually against regulations for me to discuss his grades with her, and asked her to leave. She hit the roof, started screaming and tearing up his exam, and was eventually escorted out by campus security. Holy crap, I feel bad for that kid. Parent was a lawyer and wanted to grill me as if I were on the witness stand. Based on that encounter, I'm not sure they were a very good lawyer. I give everyone my word that if my future children ever pull the "my dad is a lawyer" card on anyone they're arguing with, I'll ask the little crap or shoots for a $50,000 retainer fee. Kid refused to do any work or take tests. She was failing, obviously. Said the work was too hard. It was a 3rd year Spanish honors course for those going on to dual enrollment college course senior year. Her father was insistent that he come in to learn the material that he would then teach his daughter. I was really thrown by that one. Took about 20 minutes to convince him that the arrangement would be unsustainable. Brother's literally a trained professional already aware of the material who's trying to teach her. I used to teach senior English for 10 years. It was pretty much the only class anyone had to absolutely take senior year, unless they were behind on their 3 math or science courses. The course was specifically British literature and I tried to make it as interesting as possible for students. I tried to challenge students and prepare them for college level work, but I also allowed students to turn in late assignments for points off. My district also unofficially required us to accept late work, as failed students equals less funding. I posted all assignments on the class website for all students to access in the event of an absence, held tutorial once a week, updated my online grades weekly, and contacted parents when students were failing. I did all of this because in the event a student fails, you have to provide supporting documentation that you tried to help them. Every year, I had 2 or 3 male students, I don't know why it was usually guys, who wouldn't complete any assignments. But these kids usually had overbearing mothers who would constantly harass me and find every excuse in the book to present some fault of mine to my principal as reasoning their son shouldn't be failing. These parents' usual excuse was that they didn't know their kid was failing, despite the access to online grades, my phone calls, letters home, etc. On one such occasion I was called into a meeting with a mother a month prior to graduation. Her son had failed first semester and I was a bit surprised to see her, because she had been fairly nonchalant in our previous phone calls, saying things like, "If he fails, that's on him." Well, this lady pulled out the big guns for this Hail Mary meeting. She first said I never called her and she didn't know her son was failing. I presented my documentation on our phone calls and quoted what she said, word for word. She then stated that I was too tough on students and wanted to fail her son. I reminded her that I hold weekly tutorial for students, post all assignments online and give students time to work on assignments in class. Then, she bitched about not knowing her son failed first semester until it was too late, because his report card was sent to the wrong address. My principal pulled up their information and read back the address. She commented, "Yeah, that's my sister's house." My principal asked her for her current address and she gave it. He paused, then said, "Mom, your address is outside of our attendance zone." Realizing the mistake she made, the lady got quiet for a moment then snapped, "My son will make up all of the work he owes for your class and attend every tutorial for the remainder of the year." And he did. This is not really the same topic but a great one. One of my friend's parents got called in during high school. His son was accused of stealing and drawing really elaborate penises and putting them in high places that were hard to take down. The parent-teacher interview went like this. "So, your son is accused of stealing chicken sandwiches from the cafeteria." My son would never steal, and more importantly, because it's very distracting to the student body as a whole, he is accused drawing elaborate penises and putting them in very high places. We need to call the janitors to take them down. It takes about 2 to 3 periods. Okay, sounds exactly like my son. I will talk to him about the penises. Okay, sounds exactly like my son. I will talk to him about the penises. Now that's freaking funny. One parent told me straight up that hockey was more important than schoolwork, and that their son was going to play pro hockey within 5 years. She said he wasn't doing any homework during his week-long hockey tournament. 6 years later, I'm pretty sure he barely finished high school and is overweight and smokes weed all day. PS I quit teaching this year to help run a distillery making whiskey. I freaking love it. Not a teacher, but I work in public school education with a non-profit organization. Sitting in a parent-teacher conference with the principal of the school, mom, and the kid. The kid is in 5th grade. The principal tells the mom point blank that her child can't read, which is true. The kid could barely write his own name and couldn't read anything except basic sight words. The mom laughed and said, "My kid doesn't need to know how to read. He wears polo." I was speechless. I had no idea a parent could be that ignorant. I still think about that kid every few days and how hard his mom is making his life. Was grading tests for a teacher while there was a parent-teacher conference going on. The teacher asked the parents beforehand if I could be there as the kid was 3 years younger than me and I didn't know him. They are talking for a bit and I start to notice the teacher pronouncing a Kevin and the parents are adding an L. Kelvin. But I assume you're an accent or something. The parents start to become very dramatic, going on and on about how the teacher needed to go to the kid outside of class to make sure they were doing their homework, and such. And at the end the teacher stands up to show the parents a piece of writing from the student. Parents take it and read, look at each other and say to the teacher, "This is someone named Kevin. Our son is Kelvin." Then proceed to get very upset with the teacher because he wasn't their child's actual teacher, when they were the ones who came into his classroom to talk about their son. It nearly made me pass out repressing my laughter before they left. A friend of mine just completed her first school year as a full-time teacher. She was a substitute for the district for a couple years first, and she told me about one that really pulled on the heartstrings. She met with the parents of a kid because he had some hygiene issues, and when she brought it up she found out the parents couldn't afford their water bill and it was shut off. It turns out the only meal he was getting day to day was the school lunch, so she started making meals to bring to school that he could bring home to eat for dinner, and she paid for his breakfast every day at school. I'd always heard of kids only getting that one meal a day, but I'd never actually seen it, and I never thought it would be happening in my area. Luckily in my area, the school provides lunches to any kid under the age of 16 throughout the summer at local parks, so he'll still be able to get that through the summer. I just hope next year he'll have another teacher that cares enough to make sure the kid is able to eat. I work as a parer in an alternative classroom and I bring in food for the kids every now and then. I'll bribe them good grades for meatballs, and I have a snack center set up where they pay cost for the items instead of the ridiculously priced items at the cafeteria. If I had more money I wouldn't charge at all. I was a substitute teacher then. Special needs class. so there was more meetings with parents than normally. Normally I just saw the mom. She would pick up her kid on Fridays. She was a little bit demanding and stuck up, but nothing I couldn't handle. Talked really badly about her husband when we had parent-teacher meeting and when I called to tell what happened during the day. Some people think these meetings phone calls are their therapy sessions. Once she talked for 1.5 hours. I just didn't have the courage to make her stop. So her husband, child's father, starts picking him up on Fridays. Okay, nothing unusual. Then he comes to the parent-teacher meeting and starts asking what I do on my free time. Am I seeing someone etc? Just made me uncomfortable even though he didn't actually say anything rude or offensive. All this time his wife was sitting next to him. Accidentally met him in a bar after that. He tried to buy me drinks and flirted with me. At that moment I realized he tried to flirt with me when his wife was sitting next to him in a parent-teacher meeting. Butthole. Probably why his wife hated him. Girl's mom once yelled at me because she felt the textbook was too difficult for her child to understand and that's why her kid wasn't doing well. Student was actually very nice. Later she came to me and was like, Mr. Mark Simmonrunner, sorry about my mom. IDK why she gets like that, it's really annoying. Things are relatively docile where I work. I've heard some decent stories but never been a part of them kids' parents suing the school for some dumbass reason. Please tell me that that's your real name. It rolls right off the tongue. High school teacher here. Had a parent-teacher conference with 2 parents and their daughter. She had been achieving a steady B average in my course through her own efforts and hard work. She had long been a classified student, with a number of small issues that had caused her to struggle academically, until she matured and found ways of better managing her issues. I had her a junior, and she was doing well in my challenging course, and seemed proud of it. Then came the meeting. Her parents clearly had used the system as a way of providing their daughter with every academic advantage they could, bullying school staff along the way to create an academic plan that made it nearly impossible for the girl to not score a 95% or better in all her courses. I have never seen a plan so designed for academic success, with no intention whatsoever of helping the student develop the skills needed to survive in the world outside of school. I tried to make clear to them that she was doing very well in the course without the various supports in place, and that she was quite pleased with her accomplishments, but they could not care less. All they could focus on was the final grade being below their 95% expectation. We went back and forth for a while, with them presenting very angrily and with veiled threats. I did not back down, and the parents finally had her removed from my course. Luckily, my administration backed me, even complimenting on my willingness to stand against them as men had not before. The girl ended up taking the course over the summer in a far easier setting. It was very disturbing to see parents so bent on their version of her success that they ignored the real progress she had made. They viewed the district as an enemy, an obstacle to navigate instead of an opportunity. I can only hope that the girl found her own path as she became an adult, but I can assure you that her parents hindered her growth and failed to give her the future they imagined for her. All of their work failed her as soon as she got to college. I hope she found her own way. You can't raise a child like that. At some point the training wheels have to come off. It's best to do that while they are still a kid. A student claimed bias in grading. She and her father later emailed me, the principal, the Board of Education, and Barack Obama. Obama was president at the time, but no, he didn't reply. Thanks, Obama. As a student teacher, I was placed in a multi-age gifted and talented classroom, 5th and 6th grades. My mentor teacher was phenomenal, loved by all and incredible at her job. One little girl in our class just could not keep up. She was simply not at the level of advancement that the other kids were. She was a happy, mellow kid who didn't really care, but her mother pushed her super hard and refused to believe she wasn't the height of giftedness. At the conference, I witnessed this mother berate and blame this incredible teacher, including telling her all the other parents were taking about how bad she was. Lies. It ended with my mentor teacher having tears in her eyes. This woman did it all in front of her 11-year-old daughter, who was silently miserable the whole time. I had a parent storm out of an IEP meeting because we wouldn't agree to put an aggressive student back into a public school setting. We also had issues with the student running out of the school building and angrily stalking around the neighborhood when the slightest thing upset him. The parent just started crying and stormed out, yelling at us that he wouldn't be able to experience prom. We all just looked at each other in realization that our student 100% had learned this behavior from his parent. I first read that as wouldn't be able to experience P as written. It's significantly less shocking. I had identical twins in class with very similar names, like Jimmy and Timmy level similar. One was doing great and had friends. One was pretty disruptive and a bit isolated, but their grades were more or less the same, so I couldn't tell their files apart either. I could not remember which one was which. I had to try and figure out from the parents' body language if my guesses were on the right track. I work with 2-year-olds, so conferences are usually just yes, they're starting to talk more. Yes, we can start potty train. Yes, they are behaving well. But I have one set of parents that come in and always have to have a problem with their daughter. Mostly ones that most parents wouldn't care about at this age or at all. The last time we sat down together, they told me to make sure she doesn't eat too much because they are afraid of her getting fat. Asked if we could put more gender toys in the room because they wanted her to start playing with dolls and such instead of trucks with the boys, and asked me to push her to be more active versus artsy. She likes to sit with me and draw instead of running around while we're outside. I feel bad for the girl because they clearly love her but are trying to force her to be a picture perfect girl. That too. While I was a student teacher, I had to do a parent-teacher interview with a woman that my father cheated on my mother with. Her kid was a good kid in class and I really liked her. I don't have nice things to say about the mother. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.